Only a few years ago, everyone present would line up before her in the elite residence and listen to her orders like children. Back then, she was the strongest among them. Now, some of them had left her behind by light years. There's no need to look at it like that. Each of us can still change the course of this war in our own way. Snow replied to Ellen. We're all fighting this war together. So when it's finally over, I'd love for us to gather at the temple again, like the old days. I want that too. Me as well. Let's win this war and make it real. One after another, the former students agreed, eager to chase that distant hope. Fry Starlight remained silent among them, watching. It would be wonderful if Snow's wish came true, if they could all meet again after the war. But he knew such rosy dreams were far-fetched, especially in wartime. As he looked at them one by one, Fry couldn't help but wonder, how many of these faces would still be here when the war ended? Who would die and who would live? He had no answer, only the wish that they all survive, even as he recognized how naive that wish was. And so Fry was declared the winner, with Snow taking second, in the impromptu temple test the students had staged. The night passed quickly. They used it to talk about the temple days, about how each of them had fared so far. Soon, dawn returned them to reality. The war was still waiting, since the puppet master, Simon Manus, was the primary threat. He had to be found. The Empire's side formed small, scattered scouting teams led by Ellen White and Frost Moonlight. Your goal is to recon the area and locate the hollow, Simon Manus. Do not engage unnecessarily. Return as soon as you discover anything, ordered Gal Varian Sunlight, nominal commander of their front. Meanwhile, Snow and Fry volunteered to search on their own. We'll probe enemy territory ourselves. Maybe we'll pick up a lead on his location, Fry said, not exactly asking permission. Even if Gal had refused, he would have done as he pleased. Each scouting unit numbered only in the dozens. Except for Snow and Fry, who chose to operate separately. Their individual strength was more than enough whatever they faced. Thus the search parties set out to find Simon Manus. Standing side by side one last time before they split up, Ellen and Frost approached Fry and Snow. You two will be part of this mission as well, Frost said, and both Fry and Snow nodded. We'll speed things up. I can spread my aura across an enormous range, Fry added while checking his gear. You're both incredible. I only wish we could support you better, Ellen said, speaking her true feelings. Before we head out, I wanted to thank you, Fry Starlight. HM? For what exactly? Fry asked. For killing Gavardiol. He slaughtered my entire family. I spent most of my life training for the day I could avenge them, but you did it first. You ended him. Ellen White sounded genuinely relieved. But Fry also heard an emptiness between her words. No need to thank me. I only did what I had to do. Like Ellen, he'd had an old score to settle with Gavardiol. Ever since Gavardiol killed Danzo. So he killed him. To be honest, I was happy when I heard you'd done it, and at the same time I felt hollow because I couldn't do it with my own hands. I know it's pathetic, but for a moment I felt like I'd lost my reason to fight. Her voice, usually a weapon in itself, was very quiet now. But I think I found another reason to fight for our homeland. So, I hope you'll rely on us older ones a little more. Ellen finished with a warm smile, and both Fry and Snow returned it. Of course. Wishing each other luck, they finally split up, each heading in a different direction to cover as much ground as possible. Snow and Fry set out together at first, but soon parted ways as they pushed deeper into the barren lands of the Ultras. Looks like it's time we split up, Snow said. Fry nodded. Yeah. I know this isn't the best time to say it, but if you find the enemy before I do, don't rush it. If you can wait for me, if we fight together. You and I. No one can stop us. Snow's voice was firm. Fry didn't argue. Don't worry, my friend. I'm not fighting this war alone anymore. Glad to hear it. Snow nodded, satisfied, then broke off in a different direction. Good luck. You too. They parted, and soon each was on his own. Normally, wandering enemy territory alone would be reckless. But Fry Starlight and Snow Leonheart were now strong enough to do exactly that. And even if things soured, either could at least escape. Back to being on my own, Fry muttered as he scanned the wastes. The Ultra's land was strange and unchanging. Dead deserts, barren plains, and, now and then, forests of bleak trees emptied of life. This is the fate of any land where demons set foot. The more demons arrive, and the stronger they are, the worse it gets. Lately, even the air itself felt heavier. I need to end the Ultras quickly, and push my power as high as it will go. He flipped open the system interface. His eyes fell to his strongest asset. Shadow Adaptation. For 7. Stage 4 had unlocked, but he still didn't know what it actually did. My body has definitely changed since I purged Whisker's shadow and opened this stage. He teased at his aura. The difference was obvious. I'm definitely stronger than I was against Plotier, but the ability itself still hasn't revealed its face. Each stage of shadow adaptation had granted a frightening new power. Stage 4 wouldn't be an exception. It would surely become a major edge. But likely only under real combat pressure. I probably won't discover it until a fight forces it out of me. A foe who could push him past his limits. There weren't many of those left. Even Pontiff Sullivan hadn't truly threatened him at his current level. So Fry kept hunting for the Ultra's elites. His present target, Simon Manus. The search dragged on. All he found were lower blood Ultras settlements. Places full of the weak and the warped. Fry cut them down quickly and moved on. They did nothing for his blood path. They were too feeble even to feed it. Hours passed. Then days. Nothing. Frey's patience thinned. Where is that bastard hiding? He was nearing higher blood cities and would likely collide with other Ultras forces soon. Even so, there was still no sign of Simon Manus. Just when it seemed nothing would change, his calm crystal, the one he'd been given before setting out, flared. He gripped it and activated it. A phantom projection formed. Saris Moonlight. Saris. What is it? She'd been coordinating communications, so her call wasn't a surprise. Sorry for the sudden interruption, but it's urgent. It's fine. I haven't found anything anyway. Tell me. What happened? Saris kept it tight. Since you all set out, tracking went smoothly. We've been following your positions via the crystals. But just now, something changed. We lost Ellen White's team's signal. Suddenly, I contacted Frost Moonlight and sent him since he was nearest, but his signal vanished the moment he reached Ellen's last location. Frey's face hardened. Signal loss. Meaning, worst case, something happened to them. What about Snow? Fry halted. Snow is still advancing on the far side of the sector. He's the farthest from them. I'm going to notify him as well. Saris exhaled. Fry, this is serious. We're preparing to move the Empire's full force toward their position. But you're closest. So you want me to go first, right? Yes. All right then. Fry didn't hesitate. Guide me in. I'll handle it. Thank you, Fry. I'm counting on you. Despite her composure, Saris was clearly worried. Especially for Frost Moonlight, her house's current lord, who had matured so much of late. Losing him would be a brutal blow. Saris fed Fry the coordinates, and he surged forward at full speed. I'm the strongest the Empire has. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. He braced himself to collide with whoever or whatever had taken his comrades. In the heart of the Ultras continent, at the crown of its wastes, a lone man moved like a shadow, slipping past whatever lay within. Rain, rare upon that barren land, began to pour in sheets. As the cold drops struck his skin, Fry Starlight felt something ominous drawing near. How much farther? He called out, voice low but firm. You're very close. Just a few kilometers west and you'll be there, Saris answered at once. Copy. He accelerated. With the others still far out, he would be the first to reach the place where their allies had vanished. At his current speed, every second ate distance. Be careful, Fry. There's a high chance whatever's waiting is a trap, Saris warned. It's fine. I'll handle it. The rain intensified with each stride, and with it, the malignant pressure pressing on Frey's heart. I've sent Snow Lionheart the coordinates as well, but he'll be delayed. Ran into some obstacles. The main force is moving toward you now. Saris went on, unusually tense. Frey stayed silent. Be careful, Frey. Ca. Her voice began to break, as if something were jamming the signal. Saris? What is it? Can you hear me? F. Re. E. Wa. Re. Foo. The sound cut in and out, and then died entirely. The crystal went dark. Frey tossed it aside. Let's see what's waiting for me this time. He slammed a foot down, launched forward, and the promised place rushed up to meet him. Step by step, he drew closer, until, with Saris gone, only the drumming rain filled his ears. His task was simple. Find the teams led by Ellen White and Frost Moonlight. 70 people in all. Not few, not many. After a hard run, he stopped. In the middle of the desolation rose a crooked range of stone, and at its foot gaped the mouth of a vast cavern. A cave. If they were anywhere, it would be inside. He flared his aura, sweeping the ground before him, searching for an enemy. Nothing. No trace. Even stretching his reach to the limits, he felt no one. So he stepped in. In seconds, the dark swallowed him. Silence. Only the rain behind him, a distant hiss. As he advanced, his eyes adapted. With hawk's eye, the blackness gave way to detail. And then he saw what he had not expected. The cavern was enormous. And full of bodies. Some he did not recognize at all. Others were unmistakable. Faces he had seen only hours ago in the glow of a campfire, voices that had traded easy words with him. They were mangled, slaughtered with grotesque cruelty. Limbs severed, torsos crushed, features carved away. Blood soaked the stone. Frey's expression did not change. Death did not surprise him anymore. He walked on. Deeper in, the tunnel ended. And he understood what had happened to the missing. Before him hung a familiar corpse. He had been stabbed to death, his face defaced beyond recognition. Whoever had done this had done it thoroughly. Frost Moonlight was there, dead and ruined. His great spear, the Rimeshard, had been taken from him and used to impale him. His body displayed on it like a warning. Beside him slumped a girl he knew as well, propped against the wall. All her limbs had been cut away. Her eyes had been gouged. Dried rivers of blood stained her cheeks. And her throat was destroyed, her voice forever silenced. Her white hair was now a muddy, dark red. She had been dead for some time. Ellen White. Frey stood looking at them for a heartbeat. Then he let out a low, heavy laugh. How strange, he murmured. How absurd. You speak with someone one day, and the next you find them like this. Death was closer than anyone realized. As he stood before the bodies, a voice rose out of the dark behind him. One he had not sensed until the very last instant, his instincts exploding in warning. You're laughing, Frey Starlight. That's disappointing. I thought I did excellent work here. The voice was thick, grating. Its owner was tall, broad-shouldered, for horns arcing from his skull. A ruined grin split a warped face. Amethyst eyes burned with a predatory light beneath a black, flame-like cloak of aura. Zebar, Frey whispered, turning to face the demon head-on. Are you the one who did this? Do you see anyone else here? Zebar shot back with a mocking laugh. I see. Then it's time for the likes of you to join this war, Frey said, voice cold as he advanced on careful feet. Zebar shook his head. Not the likes of us, just me. I disobeyed orders, as you can see. Understood, Frey replied curtly, and Zebar studied him with interest. Calmer than I expected. Tell me, Frey Starlight, weren't those worthless gnats your comrades? They were. Feel nothing about the way they died? Like this? They screamed a lot when I played with them. Especially that short girl. Her voice was so annoying I had to shred her throat to shut her up. As for the boy beside her, brave enough at first, but the moment his spear couldn't scratch me, he crumpled. Hilarious, really. I could hardly stop myself. Ha ha ha. Fry cut him off. Save the provocation. Their lives don't mean much. They went to war and died in battle because they were weak. That's all. Zebar paused, then chuckled. I see. Perhaps I should have targeted others, those closer to you, but I'm no expert in such games. That's Weskier's specialty. Enough talk. You're here to fight, aren't you? Frey's patience thinned. I'm here to kill you. Good. Then let's change the place. I've no desire to fight you here. Inside, outside, makes no difference. The ending's the same. But have it your way, he led on Fry Starlight. Zebar followed as Fry turned and left the cave. The demon strolled behind him, amused, while Fry clenched his fists to keep himself steady. For all his composure, his heart hammered in his chest. How could it not when his opponent was Zebar? 10th rank High Demon. A monster bearing one of Agarotha's own abilities? With a sidelong glance, Fry measured him. He hadn't sensed Zebar before, but now that the demon had revealed himself, the pressure of his aura was unmistakable. Though weaker than when they'd first crossed paths at the start of the war. Matching what he felt with what he knew of the high demons, Fry concluded this was perhaps 50 to 60% of the main body's power. Half strength or not, that half was terrifying. Far beyond the likes of Joseph Bladier. Don't overthink it, Fry Starlight, Zebar said, clearly savoring Frey's calculations. Thinking won't help you. They stepped out into the open. Rain hammered the barren plain as they faced each other. Fight with everything you've got, Zebar said, folding his arms. Show me everything. Try to live to the end. And show me what you're really made of. If you don't, I'll be disappointed. Fry drew Balerion and Dark Sister. Before we begin, let me ask you something, 10th rank demon. Zebar tilted his head. What? I know your king never leaves his seat. Only watches from afar. And I know he somehow became one of the Great Ones after killing the demon's Great One and taking his place. At that, Zebar's smile thinned. The human before him had named secrets no human should know. So here's my question, Zebar. After he became a Great One, did Agaroth finally abandon you? Leave you to wander like masterless dogs? If that's the answer, it makes perfect sense. It suits you. A dog that can't live without a master. Isn't that why you're wagging after Weskier now? He taunted the demon head-on. Zebar's expression darkened. Killing intent rolled out so hard the air itself seemed to shudder. Then he threw his head back and laughed, the sound shaking the plain. Very good, Fry Starlight. I've no answer for your question, but I do hope your mouth isn't all you've got. His grin widened. Let's begin. At the same instant, Fry roared, unleashing everything. Dark Ascension. His SSS-class aura detonated outward, whirling back into him like a raging violet sun. Oh! Zebar arched a brow. Even for a 10th rank, that was a respectable tide of aura. Fry drew it all in, forcing it deep through flesh and bone. The process was far faster than when he'd faced Bladier. Though he left plenty of openings Zebar could have punished. The demon didn't. He wanted to watch what Fry was attempting. The aura settled. Barely inside a body now like a nuclear core on the verge of rupture. This was his peak. The most he could bring to bear at his current level. Dark Ascension layered atop the heightened control from Shadow Adaptation, Stage 4. All of it for a single purpose, to break the monster before him. The hour had come. The enemies he dreaded were here. Zebar had stepped from the void, and Fry had no choice but to fight with everything he had, and try to survive. Let's begin. In a sprinter's crouch, Fry lowered his center of gravity. Then detonated the ground and launched like a roaring violet beam, the earth shuddering as he slammed into Zebar with everything he had. Ha 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 ha. Come on, Fry Starlight. Hit me with it all. Zebar's laughter merged with Frey's feral shout. Frey's blades hammered the demon, shockwaves scouring the mountains behind Zebar. erasing them, corpses and all. The clash was monstrous. Aura pressure spiked to unheard-of levels. In a handful of heartbeats, Fry carved at his foe tens of thousands of times. Too fast for the eye to track. Yet just as quickly, Zebar's arms blurred, back fists catching steel, shunting the aftershock aside each time. "Is that all you've got, Fry Starlight?" Boom! A sudden punch slipped through Frey's guard. An explosion of raw aura and Fry was hurled away, pulverizing everything in his path. He recovered mid-flight and surged back at light speed, riding the brutal boost of Dark Ascension. "Believe me, you've seen nothing yet. Then show me." Unleashing the full breadth of 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry chained his ultimate techniques one after another at Zebar. The two tore across the sky at light speed, black trails of aura lacing behind them and knotting together. "I've always wondered why they care so much about you. Why would Weskier hide himself for years over a whelp like you?" Boom! 1,000 titanic fists collided with 1,000 murderous slashes. Thunder rolling across the wastes. At first the powers seemed even. But they weren't. Fry hadn't landed a single true hit. Zebar, meanwhile, brutalized him so thoroughly that, without regeneration, Fry would already have fallen. Pathetic. Is that it? Shut up. Fry slid back a step, packing a colossal swell of aura along his blades. 10,000 steps of shadow. Supreme art. Echo of the abyss. A tremoring mirage wrapped Fry, supercharging his cuts. He unleashed everything straight at Zebar. There was no wet rip of demon flesh. Only the ring of metal on metal. Zebar had read and caught it, again, despite the blistering speed. Fry adjusted instantly and struck again. 10,000 steps of shadow mirage. In an eye blink, 10,000 frays bloomed around Zebar, hemming him in like a cloud of gnats. And just as fast, 10,000 Zebars appeared, shredding every copy until they smashed the real one too. "Copies? On me? Ha ha ha. You're dumber than I thought." He hounded Fry, grin unshaken. High above, Zebar's fists ignited with a murderous black aura. Fry looked up to see thousands of blows pouring down like rain. Teeth bared, he braced, feet gouging the earth. Then kicked off, leaving a crater. He shot skyward like a violet star, battering through the storm of punches, forcing a path to Zebar. They met again in midair, and the battle climbed to another tier. In that cold expanse, their exchanges went berserk. Frey's swords were parried. Zebar's feral strikes landed again and again on Frey's body. Skin, flesh, bone atomized into bloody dust each time, only to knit back together an instant later. Face, arms, legs, chest, gut, shoulders. Everything was wrecked and restored, over and over, as he shouldered the horrors of a 10th-rank high demon. Zebar's laughter cracked like thunder, relentless. Fry was swatted away, then dragged across the ground as Zebar chased him down. Ah! 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 Ha 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 ha! Amid the explosions and ruin, blood and ash, the fight turned catastrophic. Fry endured by inches, monstrous regeneration and Dark Ascension barely keeping him upright. But the tide was against him. Boom! Zebar's fist crashed into Frey's locked blades, the demon leaning in harder. "What made you think you had even a chance against me?" Boom! "Even as an avatar, I'm still one of the 10 high demons the king, Agaroth, forged with his own hands. There is no world where I lose to the likes of you, Fry Starlight." Boom! The pressure Zebar poured on was insane. Orders worse than Joseph Bladier. So far beyond that any comparison felt absurd. Even at only half his true power, this level had once required 2 SSS-class combatants just to hold it back. And it had taken 6 of them just to handle a clone at 80% of his power. The 10 high demons were, simply put, instruments of total war. Peers to the 7 great powers. Their strength belonged to another world entirely, and Fry had no choice but to face that kind of power head-on. "You're strong, Fry Starlight," Zebar said, "but I exist far beyond the strength you understand. After a savage, rapid exchange, Fry Starlight was buried under tons of rubble, while Zebar stood on the peak without so much as a scratch marring his shadow-black body. I've always known what's happening on this planet is a farce. Zebar went on. With my own hands I'll end it. By killing you here and smashing everything Weskier's trying to achieve. He raised his fist, dark aura flooding into it. You aren't worth the attention they lavish on you. Maybe you have a few traits that make you dangerous, but you're still just a weakling who's easy to kill. And that is your fatal flaw. He stalked forward. Fry answered by blasting rubble away in a wave of aura and stepping out of the crater. His cuirass was shattered. The entire upper half of his body laid bare, barefoot in dreadful shape, yet already healed. He stood across from Zebar again, violet fire burning in his eyes. You're right, Zebar. I don't deserve the attention your masters give me. I don't even know why they care. He crossed his blades, settling in. I never asked for it. I never wanted it. But they left me no choice, so here I am. I fight and fight, and fight and fight, 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 until my body gives out, my soul is drained, and my blood runs dry. And still, I keep fighting. With a scream that split the air, Fry unleashed a crushing surge of aura. Violet channels cracked across his skin. I never wanted any of this. So shut up and fight me. We end it here and now. His aura swelled and swelled. Violet heat hissed from his mouth and nose. Zebar's smile returned. As you wish. Boom! The ground erupted again as they crashed together. Harder than ever. No restraint. No mercy. Their duel rattled the continent. The world could feel it from afar. Fry tried to pierce Zebar's guard again, and again he met an iron defense that turned everything aside. Grinding his teeth, he spread his swords wide like vast black wings. Dark aura howled around both blades. Then he carved a sign at Zebar. 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Draining himself to the last drop, Fry set a calamity in motion. Nameless judgment. 2 nameless judgments. One from Dark Sister, the other from Balerion. Twin colossal slashes that veiled the sky, crossing into a violet X that tore through the air toward Zebar. He watched the incoming cross. Massive, violent. A power that, bolstered by dark ascension, truly threatened him. He didn't dodge. He opened his mouth to meet it. From deep in his throat, a strange power welled up. Ashen, wreathed in lightning like sparks. Without warning, Zebar exhaled it as a devouring beam that split the heavens and slammed into nameless judgment. The collision came from another world. The violet cross bored into the roaring gray breath. Deeper, deeper until the battle became a tug of war. From behind his technique, Fry stared across a vision both sublime and terrifying. Zebar's ashen aura shearing apart around the arms of his nameless judgment. His cut was truly overwhelming. Enough that even Zebar's breath could not stop it outright. Then, after a harrowing struggle, everything detonated. Zebar's power and Frey's alike. Like a dozen nuclear suns blooming at once. Silence, then storm. A few seconds later, Fry staggered out of the dust, panting, eyes locked ahead to gauge his foe. He had his answer soon enough. Zebar strode from the blast intact, laughter knifing through the haze. You have grown stronger since our last meeting. I'll grant you that. He stood whole, save for a double gash across his chest in the shape of a cross. It was deep. Black blood leaked steadily. But such wounds meant little to demons with that kind of vitality. Especially one of the 10. He shrugged off his black mantle, revealing the full, corded frame beneath. His fists flared once more. Let's continue. He said it simply, and surged at Fry. For a heartbeat, Fry froze, mind reeling to catch up. He caught Zebar's strike a heartbeat too late, and paid for it. Fry was blasted back, Zebar streaking after him at a terrifying speed. Come on, Starlight. Show me more. The fist of a rank 10 high demon was heavy. So heavy. Heavier than anything Fry had ever taken. a mad, crushing power. And with it came a feeling he hadn't tasted in a long time. Despair. And this was only a clone. A clone carrying half the strength of the weakest among the 10 high demons. Even so, the gap was staggering. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. While Zebar laughed, Frey's world reeled. He fought like a madman with everything he had, but apart from that one wound he'd carved earlier, it felt like he'd never touch Zebar again. Show me more. Boom. Show me your strength. Show me your blood. Through Zebar's laughter, his howls, and the echo of ruin, Frey felt his head boil. The end was close. Frey Starlight's POV. I wonder, how did it come to this? Not long ago I was sitting by a campfire, calm, with only Simon Manus on my mind. Relaxed, naive. I thought I had more time. I thought I could take things slow, build my strength step by step. I truly believed the battle I feared was still far off. Reality hit me in the cruelest way. And here I am, facing Zebar, who appeared out of nowhere. He's strong, too strong. No matter what I throw at him, no matter how I cut, he withstands it all and sends back something worse. I have to fight. I whipped my blades at full power, forcing myself onward. I can't fall here. I have to fight. I roared, and Zebar answered, harsher still. Then do it. Boom. He beat me down harder than anyone ever had. I tried to endure to the very end, but my consciousness kept slipping with every blow. Only my monstrous regeneration kept me in it, and still I could barely scratch him. He shattered me again and again. In seconds, the weight of it all crashed over me. I watched his fist swell in my vision. I felt his power and understood the gulf between us. But I had to fight. I must. I'm the strongest among the humans. There's no one here stronger than me. If I fall, who fights in my place? Who survives this monster? I'm the only one who can so. I have to fight. Slash. In an instant Zebar thought he'd punch through me, only to find his fist hitting the afterimage I'd left behind. At that same heartbeat, dozens of violet scars bloomed across his body. My blade had already passed. He whirled to find me at his back. My aura seethed. My breath burned violet. My eyes lost everything but that light, turning into twin amethysts blazing without rest. I didn't know what was happening to me. I knew only one thing. I must not fall no matter what. So I met him again, and again, and again. My speed and strength spiked. I'd hit my limit. My regeneration never stopped. Every vital part he destroyed a dozen times regrew each time. And my blade finally started to land. The wounds were shallow, pathetic even, but they landed. I can hurt him. That's enough to keep me moving. Even if he destroys me 1,000 times, I'll rise again. I'll regenerate as many times as it takes, so I won't go down. The battle became a war of attrition, a blur of impossible trades. Seconds passed, then minutes. The stalemate held, and for the first time I saw a different look on Zebar's face. The horrific smile was gone, replaced by an empty mask and dead eyes. I knew that look well. Boredom and disappointment. That was what Zebar felt, and from nowhere, his fist tunneled through, carving a crater in my chest before hurling me away. I spat blood as aura coiled violently around the wound, trying to knit it shut. Zebar approached in silence. 191 times, Frey Starlight. His voice was heavy as I struggled to stand. What the hell are you saying? I rasped, and he kept speaking in the same flat tone. 191. That's how many times I've killed you since this fight began. He paced toward me, counting as he came. I crushed your heart 71 times, blew your head apart 54 times, and destroyed your lungs 66 times, Zebar said, his smile slowly returning. For humans, those are instant kills. Yet here you are, getting back up again and again. By the time he finished, my wound had already reknit, and I was on my feet. And I'll keep getting up as many times as it takes. Until I beat you. I answered, crossing my blades before me, ready to fight to the last breath. My body was boiling. Every muscle screamed. My swords felt impossibly heavy. Even so, I was set on continuing. That resolve reached Zebar, who realized this could drag on far longer at this pace. "I see. You've left me no other choice." His words struck like lead, echoing in my ears for a while, because I didn't grasp what he meant until it was too late. No choice? What exactly did he mean? What was he about to do? Thoughts raced, trying to parse it, and everything changed when he struck. Slayanash. I heard the cut as clearly as thunder. A savage line that split my chest open. Huh? The word barely left my mouth before I coughed blood and collapsed again, crimson pouring out in sheets. When I lifted my head, I saw Zebar now held a sword. A strange, wicked blade with a hooked profile, wreathed in searing black fire. He'd moved so fast I hadn't even seen the swing. But that wasn't the terrifying part. What truly chilled me was that I couldn't regenerate the wound. No matter how I tried, no matter how I focused, it refused to heal. Agony flooded me. Dizziness swelled as the blood loss mounted. "Heal! Heal! Damn you!" I shouted. But nothing happened. The injury stayed, and Zebar laughed, elated. "Let me teach you something important you've overlooked, Fry Starlight." Standing over me, his grin deepened. He kicked me until I rolled onto my back. "This regeneration you rely on and brag about, it isn't a healing factor. I confirmed that after breaking your body over and over. Simply put, your power makes your body adapt to all kinds of physical damage, process it on the spot, and restore you to peak condition. But..." Zebar paused, a murderous light glinting in his eyes. "That only works on types of damage your body has already experienced and adapted to." He. Lifting the blade to my face, he showed off the weapon. "That cursed body of yours is used to taking hits, so my punches stopped mattering. But I'll wager you've never dealt with anything like my sword." He seized me by the hair and hauled me up, his smile growing more grotesque as he made me understand my situation. "This is the cursed sword of Katarina, a one-of-a-kind weapon in the entire cosmos, paired with Katarina's armor worn by my true body. Maybe you've adapted to every kind of weapon and strike after a life of getting torn apart. But you've never fought my kind before, Fry Starlight. Do you know what that means?" He fell silent for a heartbeat, then finished. "You won't be regenerating anymore." Slash! One blur. Blood sprayed everywhere as Zebar hacked me open with feral delight. Everything turned red as the demon howled with laughter. "This is the end, Fry Starlight." Fisting my face, he held my ruined body up like a trophy, then flung me, burying me under a mountain of rubble. In those few moments as my vision faded from red to black, I understood. I had lost. The battle between Fry Starlight and Zebar wrought horrifying devastation, and ended in a catastrophic result for Fry. He fell once more into the pit of despair, his consciousness sinking away. Deep in the dark, in the void, an old, quiet fire kindled. A simple campfire, around which gathered a number of figures alike, yet different. Each was a version of Fry, but from other times and other paths. They stood in a ring, staring upward. There the present Fry, the one who had just been defeated, drifted down slowly, floating in the dark. "So, even our strongest self lost," said the Fry who won the Victoriad, while Fry the author let out a long sigh. "We can't blame him. His opponent was one of the 10 high ranks. It was only a copy. Even so, we lost miserably," said the Fry who killed Danzo, while the others sighed in grief. "Who could have predicted the regeneration would stop?" "That was the finishing blow," said the Fry who underwent the launder cycles, and everyone nodded. "Zebar may have been just a copy, but he can still summon Katarina's sword. Unlike the physical armor, the sword is a spiritual weapon any of his clones can call at will. We should have planned around it." "We should have done better," said Fry the author, only for another version to counter him. "Pointless to dwell on it now. We lost. We might not even get another chance to fight. At that, all of the phrase turned toward a single direction. Toward a place where darkness pooled, black vapor streaming up into the void. We're out of time. He's awakened. The copies said in one voice, as a shape emerged within the dark. The figure of a strange man seated on a chair drowned in shadow. He was bound in chains. But one by one the chains shattered. Shadow Adaptation 4-7. The chains fell away and for the first time, the man stood. In the same instant, all the copies heard the blast of colossal horns. A heavy sound that shook the place as the darkness thinned. The time has come. At the heart of the Ultras continent, the barren ground lay in ruins after a cataclysmic battle between a demon and a human. In the end, Zebar was the one left standing. With that, the game ends, Weskier. Zebar's voice was grave as he turned his back on the place where Fry Starlight lay buried. Time to bury this wretched planet. Wipe out the low forms of life that crawl on it. After that, everything will be consigned to oblivion. Step by step, Zebar walked away. Not even glancing behind him. He stopped when he heard a sound. Something was moving. Something crawled out from the rubble and returned to the open, slowly, very slowly. At first Zebar didn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. Even so, he turned. Slowly, painfully slowly. Behind him, a man pulled himself free of the debris. Only his lower half had emerged at first, his upper body still swallowed by shadow. I'll admit it. I didn't see this coming. Zebar sighed in annoyance and drew his blade again. What kind of cockroach are you, Fry Starlight? He didn't finish the sentence. His eyes flew wide and he froze. Fry stepped fully into the light at last, bare-chested with that same body. There was no trace of the wound Zebar had dealt him. No trace of any wound. But that wasn't what paralyzed Zebar with dread. It was the piece of metal on Frey's face. A mask. Plain, black, and metallic. Yet its presence alone made a demon of the 10th rank take an involuntary step back. Impossible! Zebar muttered, appalled. The figure before him walked forward at an unhurried pace, then stopped and lifted his gaze to the clear sky, the clouds all scattered by the last clash. With darkened eyes, he stared upward, giving Zebar no heed. Then, at last, he spoke. I had a dream. It was Frey's voice. But somehow it wasn't. A long, strange dream. He sounded a little dazed, Dark Sister in his right hand, Balerion merged with his left. A dream where I lived a different life, where I felt so many things. Anger, sorrow, joy, love, hatred. His hand pressed slowly to his chest. He lowered his head. And now I wake from it, only to find those poisonous feelings still burning inside me, splitting my heart. What kind of curse is this? Zebar answered the question with one of his own. You? What are you? The man finally looked at him. Those eyes. Where white should be, a cold, ashen gray had spread. You ask who I am? I'll answer, he said, voice low, lifting his hands. But first, what is this primitive form? With a flick of irritation, he raised his left hand to the sky. Balerion, the black blade, melted, turning liquid. A black substance that wrapped his left arm, shaping itself into a plated, onyx gauntlet that sheathed him to the shoulder. It was uncanny. Metal that hard, dissolving so easily. Then, just as simply, he tossed Dark Sister into the grasp of that armored left arm and took the sword in that hand. The motion was simple. But the instant Dark Sister was held by Balerion, everything changed. The void shuddered. The air grew heavy, and Zebar's face became a tombstone. Nameless. Zebar spoke in disbelief as Nameless tilted his head. That's the name you chose to give me of your own accord. But you're not wrong. As he said it, Nameless took a single step forward. Zebar, in turn, took several steps back. Impossible. I saw the king kill you with my own eyes. You're bluffing. Clutching Katarina's sword, Zebar unleashed his full aura. an overwhelming pressure that shook the mountains and threatened to tear the place apart. Nameless didn't so much as flinch beneath it. "I don't know where you got that mask, Fry Starlight, but you're not walking out of here alive." At light speed, Zebar streaked forward, a shroud of darkness blazing around him, aiming to end it in a single blow. It was speed on an entirely different plane. The same speed Fry couldn't even see before. But this time, things were different. Slosh! In less than an instant, a deafening blast rippled out. An explosion born from the air being cleaved so fast the void itself detonated. And in the next fraction of a second, Nameless stood behind Zebar. Zebar's hand, and Katarina's sword with it hit the ground, cleanly severed. The demon's face twisted in horror. He whipped around at maximum speed and stopped dead as a slim hand clamped over his face, a strange aura sinking into him and locking him in place. Nameless was fast. So fast Zebar couldn't even react. Hoisting him into the air, Nameless stared through the slits of the mask. "How odd. My movements feel sluggish. Dull." He glanced down at his own body, visibly annoyed. Zebar could only curse as the scope of the disaster hit him. Sluggish? Did he just say that speed was sluggish? Zebar nearly lost his mind. There was no room left for doubt. Weakened far below his zenith though he was, the figure before him was, without question, Nameless. Memories surged through Zebar's mind, old, pitch-black recollections of that masked monster who had visited ruin upon demonkind, who slaughtered the high ranks as if crushing insects. Realizing the truth, Zebar's body erupted with a violent darkness as he tore free of Nameless' grip. In the very next instant, he bolted, fleeing at absolute top speed. Even if this was only a clone, the terror was so absolute that flight was the only sane choice left to him. "I have to run. I don't stand a chance against him. Only the king and the first seat can fight that thing. No one else." Even at that speed. Nameless appeared in front of him out of nothing. "Where do you think you're going?" "Damn it!" Zebar's maw yawned wide and monstrous toward Nameless. From that hellish aperture he spewed a beam of cursed breath, a ravening ray that swallowed the void. And Nameless along with it. The blast was colossal, erasing everything in its path. "He's not as strong as he used to be. This should at least hurt," Zebar muttered, certain of a close-range hit. But from within the beam and the wreckage, Nameless emerged without a scratch. Dark Sister reversed in his grip as a guard. "Whether it's you, or the owner of this body, neither of you understands how aura truly works." He raised his blade slowly, with a heavy motion, and his entire form darkened to a cursed coal-black sheen. "Allow me to show you, demon, what real aura manipulation is." With perfect control, the familiar violet of Frey's aura vanished. In its place came a different color. A pitch-dark shade that poured ice into Zebar's veins. Shadow Adaptation 4-7. Fourth stage. The user can now wield the black hole aura, a supremely potent, hazardous aura attained by Nameless upon perfecting his power. He is the only one capable of using it. Black hole aura, a baleful kind of destructive power. In ages past it scarred even the Demon King's body, and bored straight through the flesh of dragon god Mitter, the hardest of all creatures. With ease, as Nameless let it loose, a crushing pressure dropped, and Zebar hurled everything he had in response, only for Nameless to draw a single horizontal line with his sword. The blade was wreathed in that ominous, lightless glow. In that instant, it ended. Ha! Zebar couldn't comprehend it. Nameless had cut once. Just once. A slow, ordinary stroke. Then why did the world flip upside down? As if Hell's gates had yawned open beneath him. One cut became millions. No, billions of slashes from every direction. Ominous black arcs that carved through all things. They cleaved air, void, particles. Everything was cut, and within that storm, Zebar's body was delivered to the merciless savagery of that technique. A style that belonged to the very pinnacle of their world. The aura pressure that burst forth in that instant was colossal, its echo rippling everywhere. So much so that, for a brief moment, the whole world felt it. In the Empire, people stopped mid-step, wondering about that strange sensation that came out of nowhere. Across the Ultra's continent, within the higher blood domains, in imperial camps and mustering grounds, in the nightmare lands among their beasts, everyone froze for a heartbeat, as if time itself had stalled. All of it born from that overwhelming pressure saturating the air. Like a phenomenon, a miracle from another world. In those few suspended seconds. Seated upon his chair at the Empire's helm, Aegon Valyrian narrowed his eyes, attuned to that pressure. It was as if the entire world had reacted to the presence now upon it. The presence of Nameless, appearing for the first time in a very long while. That savage strike of his went on for a long time before it finally dispersed, its aural shockwave washing out across the land. The result was horrifying by any measure. On the battlefield there now yawned a volcanic Maw meteor crater. Its rim clean, its span as large as the entire capital of Belgrade. A crater gouged by a single, simple cut of Nameless sword. And then, after a few heartbeats, the dust thinned. Nameless stepped out through it in heavy strides, Dark Sister resting in his left hand, while his right dragged Zebar's body behind him. The demon had lost most of his form and was in a ghastly, ruined state. So much so he was scarcely recognizable. With a hand sheathed in that black metal, and a plain mask that made his identity, and despite having lost the greater share of his power, Nameless had felled his foe with a single blow. He walked a little farther, then let Zebar's carcass drop from his grasp. Now that his opponent was down, Nameless' thoughts drifted. A sharp pain throbbed in his head, and he could barely remember anything. Then memories began to seep back slowly. Like flashes, little shards that pulled him toward the past. Glimpses of a battle against a certain being, before that monster. The one said to swallow everything. Nameless clutched at his skull, bewildered by the flood of feelings he now carried, feelings he had never borne in his life. They were the very emotions that had driven him to strike at Zebar without hesitation. Fry Starlight's emotions. Raising his hand slowly, Nameless looked down at his body with a heavy gaze. This is, without a doubt, a curse. His voice was low as he turned to leave. But a voice behind stopped him. Wait! It was Zebar. He had staggered to his feet, barely restoring the annihilated half of his body. Even after pouring what little power he had left into it, he was still in a wretched, weakened state. I finally understand. Huff! Why you draw so much attention, Fry Starlight? Zebar swayed as he spoke. You're Nameless, the entity that stood against the king and left his soul imprisoned in Helmont. Now I see why they want you so badly. His tired words drew Nameless' gaze. You're still alive. Sword in hand, Nameless took a step. I've lost my edge. Grown dull. So dull I can't kill the likes of you in a single blow. He advanced slowly. But I won't miss this time. Those words should have spelled Zebar's end. He braced for it. But the death he awaited never came. Instead, Nameless froze, his body shuddering violently. It was a strange sight, and Zebar couldn't make sense of it. Nameless stumbled, then his free right hand seized the mask and tore it off, flinging it away. This isn't the way. He spoke in a familiar tone, and Frey's face surfaced again. Pale with those strange gray eyes, he forced a crooked smile as he fought himself. This isn't how I want to win. This time it wasn't Nameless. It was Fry. Zebar didn't understand what he was seeing, but he knew an opening when it appeared. Mustering the last of his strength, he leapt high, summoning his sword, aiming to end Fry before any new surprise could occur. Fry, having only just wrested his body back after losing it the moment he'd fallen to Zebar, glanced down at his arm and understood he had only one chance. Dark Sister seemed to have fused with Balerion the Black Dread, become a single power, and layered atop that was the strange black hole aura still clinging to him since Nameless had wielded it. Drawing a deep breath as Zebar's blade fell from above, Fry gathered everything he had into one final strike. This is my last chance. Gathering every last drop of his strength, Fry willed his fate to change. He wanted to defy everything, and finally claim the victory he had always reached for. So in that moment, all his power, all his abilities, all his suffering, everything he had lived, the story of Fry Starlight itself was poured into a single strike. The fused force of Dark Sister plus Balerion plus Dark Ascension plus the black hole aura. All of it was forged into that blow. Fry Starlight style, with the loudest shout he could muster, and the greatest power he could summon. Fry Starlight unleashed the strongest attack of his entire life. Nameless judgment. Every ounce of that power, born on the blades now as one, became a final nameless judgment Fry hurled into the heavens. Before him, his dark attack took shape as a vast arc. A colossal bow of night, like a black hole threatening to swallow all things. That arc soared into the sky, devouring everything in its path. In that instant, Zebar watched the onrushing catastrophe. And within a heartbeat it engulfed him completely, erasing his body from existence. Ah! I should have listened to Weskier, and brought my true body. Those were his last words before the darkness of nameless judgment wiped him out. The strike was immense. Within it pulsed the power of Nameless himself. So it did not stop with Zebar's destruction. It kept climbing, a dark pillar ripping open the void, before the eyes of the world, human and demon alike. That black death rose toward the firmament. And then, in a few short seconds, came a sight none would ever forget. Nameless judgment carved through a vast portion of the moon, changing its ancient, perfect face for the first time since time began. Mouths and eyes alike fell open in shock and dread, at a phenomenon, a miracle that would not come again. The severed mass drifted away, and in that moment history was written, the sky itself standing witness to what had happened. Down below, trembling, breath ragged, Fry dropped to one knee and plunged his sword into the ground. His left hand, the one fused with Balerion Dot, was shattered completely by that strike. But he had reached his aim. He had won. With the last fading thread of consciousness, just before he fell back into the dark, Fry spoke the words he had always wanted the world to hear. My name is not Nameless. My name is Fry Starlight. The long-awaited battle between the strongest champion Earth could muster and the 10th High Demon was over, and what an ending no one could have predicted. It felt almost like a mirage, as if the fight had never happened at all, for no one knew what Fry Starlight had faced, nor what kind of foe he had met head-on. But the sky would forever stand as witness to that night. The moon, constant for thousands of years, had changed. Its great mass cleaved by a final nameless judgment, the greatest stroke ever unleashed by Fry Starlight's blade. Shards of ruin drifted around it. The two sundered halves hovered close, yet everyone knew they would never be one again. Likewise, the world would not return to what it had been before that battle. Across the Ultras continent, clouds gathered anew after being scattered by Fry and Zebar's blows. Now that the fighting had ended, it was only a matter of time before rain came down harder than before. In a crater the size of Belgrade itself, Fry Starlight lay unconscious, having spent everything and suffered through it all once more. The Dark Sister had fallen beside him, while Balerion, that great black sword, had lost its shape as well, fused to Frey's arm in the form of a black armored gauntlet, a demonic hand, as if it belonged to some ancient, unknown creature. At the crater's rim, a woman stepped from nothing, rain beating and rolling off her elegant hat. Zebar has been defeated, Beatrice said, her face devoid of expression. Even if that was only half the power of a 10th throne great demon, it doesn't change the fact. He was defeated. What had happened had exceeded even the witch's expectations by leagues. In truth, she could no longer claim to foresee events at all. She had never imagined Zebar would disobey Weskier and enter the war himself. When he did, Beatrice assumed Fry and his companions were doomed, unless the shadowed powers backing them chose to intervene. Reality proved otherwise. At the end of the battle she had witnessed, with her own eyes, the manifestation of a being she had believed dead long ago. "I've seen Fry Starlight don the mask before, and I took him for a cheap imitation, an echo unworthy of attention. I was wrong. That power, that pressure and dreadful aura she had felt. Beatrice had never stood before the true Nameless. Someone like her would die just by drawing near, given the gulf between their powers. Yet she could still affirm that, if only for a few fleeting moments, Fry Starlight had become nameless. That's why Weskier is obsessed with him, and why the king showed interest in this world despite his torpor and his loss of interest in all else," she said quietly, lifting her gaze to the moon Frey's blade had carved. In those brief moments, Beatrice recalled what Weskier had once told her. She had always wondered why the Upper Fourth Weskier didn't simply kill Fry. The answer was that he never wanted Fry dead at all. He wanted him alive. The reason was finally clear. After the final battle between the Demon King Agaroth and the shrouded warrior Nameless, the king prevailed and Nameless fell, she murmured. But in his last moments, Nameless did something born of a power that toyed with life and death and broke every law. In that domain, he stood far above Agaroth. Exploiting that uncanny mastery, Nameless conjured a phenomenon no creature has since understood. Though he lost, a strange working took shape at the battle's end, and Agaroth's soul was bound in chains of abyssal strength. With the wounds he had taken fighting Nameless, the king could not repel that sorcery. Nameless manipulated souls better than anyone. Better even than Masketh. Knowing he would lose after clashing with Agaroth time and again, he devised that mad plan. He could move souls into vessels. That was what he tried to do with Agaroth. Yet the king's power was too vast. There was no vessel capable of holding him. So Nameless made Helmont, the demon's world itself, into Agaroth's vessel, his prison. A prison that held him for a very long time, sparing the rest of existence from his horrors for a while. That battle marked the beginning of the king's isolation. Few knew the truth. Even now, many remain ignorant of why Agaroth withdrew. But it didn't happen without cause. His final rival was the direct reason. Agaroth, the demon king who conquered the world and fought without end, who crushed its titans and claimed the summit, became a prisoner of the very ground where he began. The blow was so great that the first seat, Crimson the Red Moon, in his fury wrought calamities. Yet contrary to expectation, Agaroth did not rage. He accepted it, and remained in Helmont of his own accord for years upon years, quiet and absent from the field. Among his followers, reactions split. The first seat, Crimson the Red Moon, cast down his spear and secluded himself in Helmont as well, remaining by his king's side as guardian of the heights Agaroth occupied. Crimson was fearsome in his own right. Many likened him to Agaroth himself. Even he laid down his weapon after that last battle between his king and Nameless. The other high seats differed. The second, Agar's, and the third, Vane, acted on their whims, heedless of their kin. The demon ranks fractured between the power centers of the fourth, Weskier, and the fifth, Marvas. A fair number also rallied to the Dukes of Hell, beasts whose might rivals that of the 10 high seats. Among them was Gale, the father of the Abyss, the mightiest of all. So enraged by Agaroth's stance that he stormed the Tower of the End, the very place where the Demon King resides. He broke into the tower and reached its summit, but there he clashed with Crimson. Their ferocious duel ended with Gale's withdrawal. No matter how he tried, he could not defeat the first seat. Thus the Dukes of Hell began acting on their own, and the high seats split as well, sending the demons into a long retreat. It was the end of an era, the Age of Ruin, the demonic age that kept the world in ceaseless terror. Demons still raided other races. They had to, for they live on life force itself. But their pace slowed greatly, and their strength waned with the absence of the king and the first seat. And so the other races finally drew breath and lived in peace for a long while, spared the endless, soul-devouring wars against the beast that swallows all. The demons fell far. Because of a single person. Nameless. Even in death and defeat, that masked warrior left his chains wrapped around their throats like an eternal curse. Many of the greater demons believed this state would last far longer. But a few years ago, Nameless seal, and the chains binding Agaroth, grew weaker for the first time, weaker by a hair. Too slight to change anything then. Yet the strongest, keenest demons noticed at once, sensing that something was happening. The cause remained unclear, but it coincided with one thing: the appearance of Fry Starlight. There was no proof, but the king's eye saw something. And that was why Weskier came to Earth immediately. After his cataclysmic fight with the engineer and Abraham Starlight, Weskier stayed on Earth, spinning threads and seeding his poisons. He hid in the shadows, watching quietly from afar. For years he observed. And in those short years, the Upper Fourth discovered something pivotal. Something that would change everything. Now that Beatrice had witnessed the truth with her own eyes, she knew. Fry Starlight is nameless. Or rather, Nameless resides within him. Now it all makes sense. The dots connected. The truth Weskier uncovered was simple, but decisive. The power of the seal imprisoning Agaroth was ebbing, little by little. And whenever it did, it coincided with Fry Starlight's growth. His mastery over different facets of himself. That colossal seal is Nameless power itself. The stronger Fry Starlight grows, the weaker the seal becomes in turn. It seemed the power was returning to him. And if Fry Starlight were to become Nameless in full, if that masked warrior returned at his peak, there would be only one outcome. The seal will break, and the Demon King will return. That is why they need Fry alive. That is why Agaroth has not killed him, despite being able to do so from afar with ease. Weskier, too, knows this thanks to the King's eye. So he has not killed Fry, only driven him to his limits. Zebar did not know, nor did Beatrice, but the last battle laid the truth bare for them both. Fry Starlight, you are the key that will open the door to a new age of horrors and war. You always were the key, unconscious at the heart of the crater. After a brutal fight and a hard-won chance to rest, Fry had no idea this was only the beginning, that he had opened the way to a different hell, and that the greater demons now understood what he was, and how important. You will not die. You won't be allowed to die anymore, Beatrice said, a wry smile curving her lips. You won't die, but you will walk through a hell unlike anything you've ever seen. Fry Starlight, poor man. Toward that man, she felt ridicule, and a flicker of pity. He had grown so powerful she could no longer handle him. Even tricks would not avail her now. It had become necessary to raise the level and send foes who could push Fry to the brink. That was what Weskier had been doing all along, and, at the same time, what the engineer had done as well. Both sides worked the same design for utterly different ends. Between one and the other, Fry Starlight was forced to bear everything alone. The engineer Gehrman machinations and the Nameless cult. The pressure of the demons. The weight of being watched by Agaroth. Weskier's shadows coiling ever tighter around his throat. Unprecedented pressure, all on one man's shoulders. You've won a great victory, Fry Starlight, but at what cost? Beatrice said one last time, turning her gaze elsewhere. It seems our esteemed guests have finally arrived. I should go. With a subtle shimmer, Beatrice vanished, and her words echoed once more upon the rain. What a poor man you are, Fry Starlight. On the far side of the devastation, the Empire's detachment finally arrived. Thousands of fighters poured in under the command of Galvaran Sunlight, with Frey's companions at the forefront. Uriel, Selena, Ceres, Dawn, all of them were there. They had raced at full speed, ready to throw themselves into battle, but their fervor was smothered halfway there when a colossal pressure rolled in from afar, an echo of a power none of them understood, a pressure from another world. And then, out of nowhere, they all witnessed the rending of the moon. Being so close, they saw Nameless judgment lance into the heavens with terrifying clarity. There was something familiar in that power. an aftertaste of Fry Starlight's aura that every one of them knew. It was too much. Many froze, refusing to advance. Who would dare step into a fight at that level? There could only be death waiting there. Even so, they pressed on. Once that pressure finally dissipated and it became clear the battle had ended. When they reached the site, they stopped dead before the vast impact basin that stretched for staggering distances. A crater the size of a nation. In those brief moments, beneath the torrent of rain drumming on their helmets, the Imperial soldiers stood staring for a long time at the ruin before them. Among them, Gal Varion clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened, teeth grinding. What kind of battle leaves destruction like this? Whispers rippled everywhere. Soldiers traded fear and bewilderment in hushed tones. Some dared to descend into the crater. Saris took to the air, sweeping the scarred landscape from above. The deeper she looked into the aftermath, the deeper her frown grew. What happened here? Who did you face, Fry? What kind of enemy drove you this far? The crater was enormous, but finding Fry didn't take long. He lay there, in its very center. Saris reached him first, with the others close behind. Fry was in a strange state. The upper half of his body was bare. His lower garments were shredded. Though his body showed no wounds, his complexion was ghostly pale. Dark Sister was stabbed into the ground beside him, thrumming with a solemn, resonant hum. His left hand was sheathed in a baleful black gauntlet that made Saris's instincts bristle the moment its presence pressed against her. It seemed Fry had collapsed the instant the battle ended, falling face down into unconsciousness. Saris gently turned him over. That finally revealed his face. It was the same man she had seen so many times, yet somehow different, as if he came from a world entirely apart. "Every time I see you, you're farther away," she murmured, reaching places we could never follow. Uncovering the tattoos that wound along her arms, Saris set Frey's head in her lap, then placed her palm over his chest. The sigils flared with a regal sky-blue light, and strange spikes of pure aura unfurled, coiling around him. For the first time in his life, Fry had exhausted the immense SSS rank reserves within him. The ocean inside him had run dry. Saris poured everything she had into him. The others arrived in a rush. Uriel bent over him, golden power bright with worry. But all she could do, like Saris, was feed him her aura. His body bore no lasting injuries. That was the trace of Nameless. The state Fry had entered for that brief, terrible span. Nameless had repaired the mortal wound Zebar left in him as if it were nothing at all. No matter how hard he tries, wherever he goes, it seems his fate is to fight alone, Uriel said softly, sorrow shadowing her voice. Saris kept her silence. Even with Snow and Uriel ready to stand at his side, it felt inevitable that Fry would find himself alone against monsters. It was a bitter truth. One by one, soldiers filtered in, but few dared draw near. Keenly aware that this gaunt man had split the moon and wrought a miracle before their eyes. A heavy silence thickened, until Selena pulled out a scrying crystal and her face darkened, shade by shade. "What is it?" Dawn asked at her side, and heads turned toward her as one. In that moment, Selena spoke for all to hear. "Snow Lionheart." Her voice was leaden as she delivered the news. "We've lost Snow Lionheart's signal." It was only the beginning. The wheel of war turned forward, and events began to accelerate. The Black Knight of Earth had prevailed. After a thunderous battle that split the moon and wrought a phenomenon humanity would never forget. Now, the White Knight of Earth was about to face his own trial. Since parting ways with Fry, Snow Lionheart had pushed deep into Ultra's territory. For days he moved relentlessly, erasing every enemy encampment he found along the way, until Saris Moonlight's call reached him, reporting the sudden disappearance of their allies. "I'll head there at once." That was Snow's reply as he veered off and streaked toward the same destination Fry had chosen. He was on the opposite end of the map entirely, so naturally it would take him much longer. Except his void step let him devour distance at terrifying speed. The plan was to rendezvous with Fry Starlight, learn what had happened to their comrades, and deal with any enemy presence on site. That was the plan. And so, Snow Lionheart tore across the Ultra's deserts, unaware that his movement had already been caught in the distant gaze of demonic eyes. Atop a high ridge that overlooked the barren plain, two figures stood watching him. One was a demon with the shape of a young man. But his mere presence was a catastrophe. Beside him stood a hooded giant, over 3 meters tall. From beneath the black cloak poured an uncanny, killing chill, an aura that felt like living frost. They stood there and they watched. Then the demon raised a finger and pointed at Snow. That simple gesture was an omen. Ill luck descending upon the promised hero. Seconds later, the hooded creature answered the signal, launching in the direction the demon had indicated. "How's the situation?" Snow asked as he ran at maximum speed without slowing a fraction. On the other end of the channel, Saris Moonlight answered immediately. "Fry is about to reach the point where our teams vanished. At your pace, you'll catch up to him in a few hours." Snow's expression tightened. "That's not good. If I'm more than an hour late, it could all be over by the time I arrive." Saris nodded to herself, agreeing. "I'll ask Fry to hold position and wait. There's no need for him to charge in alone." She had been bouncing the link between Fry and Snow nonstop, coordinating them both. But Snow refused at once. "No need. I'll be there shortly." Even as he spoke, Snow's eyes flared with pure radiance. He was about to unleash his true power and carve a straight path to Fry. He was certain he could close the gap if he went all out. Light of immaculate purity flooded Snow Lionheart's body. Since mastering the spirit of light that resided within him, his power had surged, amplified by the Golden World Tree and the opening of his path. It was like a colossal dam bursting, letting a cataclysmic volume of destructive force roar through. Covering that distance and joining Fry would be trivial. But before he could move, Snow froze in place. A strange, glacial aura crept over his skin, a warning that prickled every sense. Danger. Colossal shadow fell across him. Snow's eyes lifted slowly. A great sword was cleaving the air straight for his skull. Held by a towering, massive creature wreathed in a detonation of killing intent that promised to obliterate everything it touched. An instant before that blade could split him, Saris Moonlight felt her stomach drop. The detonation was so violent she felt its echo through the crystal despite being far away. "Snow, are you okay? What's happening?" She couldn't see from his angle. The crystal didn't show her the strike. "Snow," she called again, just as his voice came back, steady. "Calm down. I'm fine." Snow had already reappeared far from the impact point. The blow had gouged a vast crater into the desert, at the center of which stood the hooded monster. Snow stood at a distance, gaze cool. "Saris, looks like some obstacles showed up. I'll handle it and call you back." Saris hesitated. She had no idea who the enemy was or how strong, but it was only one opponent, and Snow was the strongest of their generation after Fry. She assumed he could manage it. "Can you take it?" "Of course I can. I'll finish this quickly. Tell Fry not to do anything reckless." "All right. Good luck." Snow cut the link. His expression grew colder still. On the other side, the strange creature cast off its shroud and revealed itself. It was no human, an otherworldly figure from whose body rose a cold, uncanny vapor. Fully armored, great sword in hand, its face hid beneath an ethereal helm. Its eyes burned a sky-blue glow veiled in darkness, and its aura was dreadful. Facing it head-on, Snow Lionheart felt that power and began to recognize it. A crushing pressure. One that reminded him of a very particular man. This pressure, it matches. No, it surpasses Bladier. A hard smile slowly formed on Snow's face. SSS class, then. His opponent was anything but ordinary, yet for all Snow's scrutiny, it didn't seem sane. The thing hadn't spoken a single word. Instead it screamed, a feral bellow, as its aura swelled. Golden sigils flared across Snow's body as he stepped forward. "You, I know what you are," Snow said, voice cold as he advanced. I still can't fully grasp all of my old memories yet, but I recognize you without a doubt. You're one of the Knights of Bahara, aren't you? The Knights of Bahara, a cadre of warriors from the Fireborn race who dwell on a distant world called Irithil, the very race that produced number 6 of the 7 great powers, Vort. Knights of Bahara are supposed to be the noblest of fighters, sworn to follow the path of the great warrior, Saint German. That is what you were meant to be, fallen knight. Snow drew Vermithor. Knight of Bahara, I don't know why you've come here, so far from your kin, but I promise you this. If you withdraw now and put away the killing intent you're aiming at me, I won't harm you. I won't lay a finger on you. And I won't kill you. His tone sharpened. But if you still choose to raise your blade against me, you leave me no choice. The answer was another savage howl from the armored knight. That was all Snow needed. I see. So be it. There was nothing left to say. The battle had already begun. The Bahara knight blew the ground apart beneath his feet and charged like a berserker, annihilating everything in his path. Snow slipped aside at once. Light spirit power wrapped his blade, and with a flick of his hand he loosed dozens of radiant arcs that hammered into the knight's frame, shockwaves ripping outward. The Bahara knight tanked the barrage and hurled his greatsword at Snow. Snow dodged again. Only a fool would take that strike head-on. He was right. The instant he slipped past it, a distant mountain behind them was cleaved clean through. Snow wove the elements, feeding blue fire along his edge and packing his left hand with black lightning. He countered in a blur, carving for the giant's mass. Blue fire detonated with black thunder. The light spirit amplified each element monstrously as runes flared across Snow's body. The knight staggered a single step. Then came again, even more ferocious. A tank then, reading his foe, Snow attacked anew. He circled at speed, raining black bolts and sapphire flame, lacing them with focused slashes of light. Every shot landed. The armor absorbed it all. The knight's swings only grew heavier. Each sweep of that colossal blade hurled a storm of destruction and killing frost that scoured the field. Under that overwhelming pressure, Snow evaded. Barely each time. Without noticing, a haze of rime was crawling over his skin. Feeling that ether cold creep toward him, Snow understood the tide. This ether chill, they say it can freeze even souls, slipped past time itself. He poured more light spirit power through his body, purging the frost, and fought on. I don't understand. Why would one of the knights famed for their honor and chivalry, and their hatred of demons, attack humans? He questioned aloud as he watched the rampaging foe. Snow Lionheart now possessed most of his former memories. Of the life he'd lived under another name. He still hadn't put all of himself back together. But some truths were clear. This night, he isn't in control. Since the first exchange, the Bahara knight hadn't uttered a word. Only charged him with mindless savagery, as if programmed for a single purpose, to kill Snow. I see what's happening now. Once he saw it, the pattern snapped into place. Someone else was pulling the strings. Far away, atop the high ridge, Geppetto sat watching the duel unfold. Snow Lionheart was holding out brilliantly, but the knight was grinding him down. It was only a matter of time. Geppetto sighed, annoyed. I can't believe Zebar chose to defy orders. Staring toward the far horizon, he felt clearly what was happening in the distance. He's fighting Fry Starlight right now and having all the fun, while I'm forced to stay back and send one of my prized heroes to deal with a single human. Zebar had disobeyed orders, but Geppetto didn't dare do the same. Sending only one of his heroes was the limit, after Zebar demanded he make sure no one else interfered. Bored, Geppetto yawned lightly. Hurry up and finish that human, Bahara Knight. You're one of my finest dolls. This shouldn't take you long at all. The Bahara Knight was SSS class, just a shade stronger than Joseph Bladier. That level alone was enough to wipe out Imperial forces by himself if it came to it. Right now all he had to do was handle Snow Lionheart. Snow was fighting savagely, unleashing a stunning array of elements and combat tricks. That light in particular drew Geppetto's eye. That light. It's very close to the light spirit Neto uses. Neto. The 9 high-rank demon. Jep 4 shook his head. But what that human's using is much weaker. A knockoff, perhaps. However he looked at him, Snow didn't seem human at all. More like a light-bearer. But he was far too weak to be a real threat. Then, as Geppetto watched the battle, something struck the ground behind him without warning. He spun, startled, only to find another masked man standing there, human-shaped in build. Yet the man's presence was so terrifying that Geppetto broke into a sweat for a heartbeat until recognition set in. "Ah, it's only you. Don't scare me like that." He exhaled in relief, his smile returning. "I see you finished what I assigned you. Well done." Geppetto praised him sincerely, but the man said nothing. The 13th high-rank demon had no idea how to handle this particular hero. Usually he was stronger than his dolls. This was the first time one of his subordinates had surpassed him. Clapping the man's shoulder with genuine pride, Geppetto walked back to his vantage point over the field. "Make sure you stay at your best. With you, I'll break into the 10 high seats for sure." "Ah ha ha, ponto." He laughed, ugly and obscene. "Once we finish with this cursed planet and return to Helmand, I'll personally rewrite the 10 high seats order that hasn't changed in ages." Ambition burned in him, and that man was the reason. The 13th high-rank demon was excited. The masked figure behind him remained still, showing no sign of life at all. Right in the middle of Geppetto's gloating, everything changed. A bizarre, overwhelming aura pressure fell. Colossal, terrifying, a presence from another world. He whipped around and barked. "What was that?" The reaction was warranted. That insane pressure came from the direction where Zebar was fighting Fry Starlight. It was horrifying. Even the masked man beside him turned to look. Moments later, Geppetto's eyes widened as a dark radiance speared the sky. Before his very eyes, the moon was cleaved, its shape remade by a single strike. An overwhelming blow that only a handful in this world could unleash. Zebar. In that instant, a dreadful truth hit Geppetto. The aura of the 10th had vanished completely. It had only been a clone. But none of this was supposed to happen. His expression darkened by the second. What is going on? Did that bastard Zebar actually lose? To who? Fry Starlight. Unable to make sense of it, Geppetto prepared to move. Impossible! He was about to go see for himself when he froze. Another crushing aura slammed down. This time from the opposite side. Specifically from where Snow Lionheart was fighting the Bahara Knight. What now? Geppetto snarled as a column of immaculate light swallowed the battlefield and speared the heavens. A light so pure it made him feel bitter even from this distance. That power was fundamentally hostile to demons. Moments earlier, after struggling under the knight's pressure, Snow had fallen back. That was when Fry Starlight sent his nameless judgment that split the moon. A sight that stunned Snow. Seconds later Snow laughed aloud, joy plain on his face. He recognized his friend's power instantly. "Yes, Fry, that's the one." Smiling, Snow rose again to face the Bahara Knight. "I've humored you long enough, Bahara Knight." As he spoke, Snow's aura deepened and his power surged monstrously. "From this point on, I won't fight you as Snow Lionheart. You don't deserve that." Bit by bit, his aura swelled. His eyes blazed with a searing white light. The armored knight lunged at once. But that vast radiance blasted him back immediately. Snow's voice rolled out from within the pillar of light. "From this point on, I'll fight you as the pure vessel. The first Lord of Light." Light erupted. Snow drew out his full might, walking the path of the Lightbearers, returning to his ancient origin. He began by emulating the pure vessel's memories that flickered through his mind. The pure vessel's power had once been so great he was ranked #1 among the 7 great powers. What Snow accomplished wasn't more than a glimpse of what the purest of vessels had once been, but even that glimpse brought a staggering transformation. When Snow stepped from the column of light, he was no longer the same. At the beginning, This was the war form that made the name Pure Vessel echo across the world. From within the radiance, Snow extended his left hand. Slowly, the rest of him emerged, before the Bahara Knight's visor, and Geppetto's stunned gaze. He stepped out and declared himself to the world. His right hand still held Vermithor, but a round golden shield had appeared from nothing in his left. His clothing was gone, replaced by a grand cuirass gilded in gold. Armor reminiscent of an ancient Roman warrior, plating chest, arms, and legs in hammered sunlight. And at last a golden helm covered his face as well. Pure Vessel, the anointed war state. Unveiling a final war aspect erased from history, Snow Lionheart rekindled old legends of a great warrior of the past, and unleashed that might upon the Bahara Knight. The White Knight of Earth, too, was set to fight, down to his last breath. In the thick of the clash between Snow Lionheart and Geppetto's champion, every eye witnessed that breathtaking pillar of light that pierced the heavens and bathed the barren Ultras lands in radiance. From within it, the one who stepped out was no longer Snow Lionheart. He had become something else entirely. Pure Vessel, the anointed war state. In a form utterly different, Snow appeared bearing a round golden shield. His clothes had vanished, replaced by a Romanesque panoply that covered only select parts of his body, and a resplendent golden helm through which his golden eyes blazed lamps of searing brilliance. The instant he entered this form, the very air around him changed. His presence alone grew vastly heavier. Bahara Knight, I'm sorry for what you've been reduced to, but your suffering ends here. Gripping the great sword Vermithor, its blade now far longer than before, Snow drove forward, and the raging Bahara Knight did the same. Both were armored like true knights, making the collision all the more spectacular. The Bahara Knight's sword was a towering thing, over 3 meters long, each sweep erasing swathes of terrain. But this time, that frost-wreathed colossus halted dead against Snow's golden shield. Planting his feet, Snow seized the opening and rammed Vermithor straight into the knight's chest. The thrust was so fierce that a terrifying lance of light blew out the Bahara Knight's back, leaving a yawning crater through him. Riding the momentum, Snow followed with several lightning-quick cuts that ripped into his foe. Vermithor had grown so potent that tearing through the knight's iron hide had become almost simple. Sensing danger, the knight recoiled at maximum speed, trying to reset. The instant he did, Snow hurled Vermithor like a spear instead of a sword, and in the blink of an eye the blade skewered the Bahara Knight with brutal precision. The knight toppled backward, only for Snow to appear above him out of nowhere, hand already on the hilt. If that's all you've got, this will be over quickly. Snow prepared to finish it. But at that very moment, his words seemed to trip some hidden alarm within the knight. The armored giant began to scream, blasting out a surging wave of aura that hurled Snow away. Snow righted himself at once, bracing against the pressure and fixing his gaze on the frenzied foe. The knight's body swelled monstrously. From roughly 3 meters tall he surged past 5, and threatened to grow even more, changing from armored knight to armored beast. Strange fluids seeped from the cracked mask of the knight's helm, erupting at the mouth. With that, he loosed his fiercest howl yet and opened his jaws, spewing a roaring beam of killing frost. Frost that froze the very air and carved a path straight for Snow. Snow slipped behind his golden shield at once as the beam detonated across it. The aura pressure was immense. He could feel his opponent's power spiking, desperate to keep pace. Icy ether crept through Snow's body, threatening to freeze him solid and strip away his life. But the light soul countered instantly, dispelling the frost and flooding him with warmth. Seeing the breath had failed, the Bahara Knight shut his maw and seized his sword, charging to drag Snow into a pure contest of strength. Snow did not refuse. He met him head-on. The swollen Bahara Knight swung with wild, brutal force. Every blow unleashed shockwaves that shattered mountains and cleaved the earth into trenches. Yet none of those attacks touched Snow. Everyone was caught on the golden shield. Vermithor's answers were lethal now, devastation sharpened by the light soul's blessing. Sensing true peril, The knight warped his aura, sending wave after wave of frost. Around the battlefield, dozens of ice spears, forged of a chill hard as steel, burst forth to skewer snow from every angle. At the same time, the aura around the knight's blade thickened, each impact heavier and more savage than the last. Snow's swordwork flowed with ruthless precision, the light around him a beacon that flooded the arena. Arcs of radiance devoured the ice spears in torrents of speed, and the Bahara knight's sword, no matter how dense the aura upon it, was turned aside time and again. Snow's body, reinforced by the light soul and the golden, sacred aura, was terrifyingly resilient, neither to be pierced nor broken. Enduring everything the Bahara knight hurled at him, Snow drove through and unleashed a dazzling cut that opened the giant's armor wide. "It's useless, Bahara knight. You won't break through me with attacks like these." Boom! With a swift sweep of Vermithor, Snow sent the massive knight hurtling away, then chased him into the sky, colliding with him once more. The crash of Vermithor against that colossal blade blasted a tide of annihilating force across the land, and the two slammed back to earth, gouging it open. The Bahara knight kept vomiting out more and more aura, his flurries so relentless that the entire field was turning into a coliseum of frost. Snow, by contrast, seemed dimmer, like a lone star adrift in a cosmos of ice. Even so, with every passing second the Bahara knight was the one racking up damage, while Snow hadn't been struck once. From afar, Geppetto watched, his eyes widening bit by bit. "He's overwhelming him." Snow Lionheart holds the clear advantage over the Bahara knight. However he looked at it, it was obvious Snow was controlling the flow despite everything the knight hurled his way. The Bahara knights in the first tier of SSS. Not the very top, but still a colossal force, especially here on Earth. If Snow Lionheart can beat him, does that mean this human has already broken through? Geppetto balked at his own thought. Impossible! He forced himself to recall what he'd sensed at the start of the fight. In raw terms, Snow Lionheart was SS at best. With his abilities and that War King form that made him resemble the Lightbearers, his power climbed to match the peak of SS+. That should have been his ceiling. Yet the moment he entered the anointed war state, everything changed. Snow's aura output surged past SS+ and stepped into the realm of SSS. As if he had become someone else entirely. And that light of his, it was so potent it no longer felt like a mere imitation. No doubt about it. That's the light soul. Realizing this, Geppetto knew he'd badly underestimated Snow. Fry Starlight wasn't the only human packed with secrets. Snow Lionheart no longer felt human at all, but a true light-bearer, his power no joke. First Fry Starlight and now Snow Lionheart. What is happening on this cursed planet? He dragged his gaze back to the battle. Snow still dictated the pace and had inflicted massive damage on the Bahara knight. The answer Geppetto sought had already been spoken by Snow himself. Geppetto simply hadn't grasped it. The human hero had said it plainly. From this point on, he wasn't fighting as Snow Lionheart. He was fighting as Pure Vessel, the great warrior who once ranked No. 1 among the 7 great powers. A warrior who, in the distant past, slew beings within the upper 10 seats. His current might was but a pale echo. The road to reclaiming his prime was still long. But merely invoking the anointed war state had given him a tremendous boost, especially with the light soul dwelling within. The Bahara knight could do nothing and was thoroughly cornered. Even so, Geppetto hadn't given up on him. This Bahara knight is one of the finest champions I've ever acquired. And recovering his body was no simple feat. To add the knight to his vast army of the dead, Geppetto had been forced to kill him himself and preserve the corpse. It had nearly cost Geppetto his life. It wasn't his brute strength or flashy strikes. Back then I still controlled the fight. But when the Bahara knight was truly on death's door, he used something. A bizarre ability that almost blindsided Geppetto into the grave. Snow Lionheart, you're strong. But the real test hasn't started yet. Not until the Bahara knight was pushed to the absolute limit, with no hope of survival. With each second, that moment drew nearer. Inevitable. Slash! Tearing the knight's helm, Snow drove his sword straight into his foe's head. He ripped it free and instantly slipped past a sudden surge of frost that crawled across ground and air alike. There's no point dragging this out. Clasping Vermithor in both hands, Snow gathered the light soul within him, ready to end it in a single, final stroke. Burn in light, and find your rest, ancient night. With one sweeping cut, Snow unleashed a colossal arc of radiance. It chewed the land to rubble and streaked toward the broken knight at terrifying speed. Judgment of light. Snow's strongest strike hit home, and within moments the Bahara knight's body erupted and began to crumble beneath the weight of Snow's light. The murderous cut bored through him at a terrifying rate. To take the blow in full would mean certain death. Instinct screamed it at the Bahara knight, triggering the danger mechanism deep in his mind. At that final instant, with death a hair's breadth away, the space around the Bahara knight shuddered, and the knight's eyes blazed. From within the broken knight's body, a strange cold pulsed outward in a ring, a wave that toyed with the void itself and sank everything around him into darkness. For a moment, the world seemed drowned in a deep, murky blue, and as it spread, everything froze. Snow Lionheart's magnificent strike halted mid-arc after carving through half the knight's torso. Snow himself stood on the far side, locked in place, unable to move a muscle. Even far away, Geppetto froze as well, along with the hooded giant behind him. That figure's eyes glimmered faintly. Unlike the others, yet he too remained fixed where he stood. Thus space itself congealed, and time ceased to advance for all who stood upon that battlefield and near it. The only one able to move within that frozen domain was the broken knight, and no one else. This was the ancient Bahara knight's trump card, his ultimate art. The firefolk were singular, capable of wielding a peculiar frost that warped the fabric of space. Some among their strongest became infamous for powers that seemed to meddle with time itself. The trick, however, was not truly time, for time still crept forward. The knight's uncanny frost froze reality and the senses of all present, making it feel as though time had stopped. It was the very gambit that had nearly ended Geppetto's life in the distant past. He had barely escaped it. Now Snow Lionheart faced the same snare. The Bahara knight gripped his sword, his shattered body dragging itself through the congealed void, closing on his helpless foe to end it while Snow could do nothing. Snow stood there, frozen, sword in hand, shield lowered. His whole body bared. However great his strength, a direct hit like this would be catastrophic. In only a few heartbeats, the knight reached him and raised his blade high to finish it. This was the end. Slay Ash. At the fight's conclusion, everyone heard steel sing. Flesh and bone crushed. Time lurched forward again, and Geppetto finally saw the result. One that blew his eyes wide in shock. Far off, Vermithor was buried deep inside the knight, obliterating him with a final, overwhelming thrust. At the very last instant, Snow had moved before the broken knight, slipping past the halted flow, cleaving the Bahara knight who never imagined his prey could strike inside the stopped world. Freezing time, is it? Shoving the ruined body away, Snow unleashed a roaring beam of light that devoured the knight's remains, reducing them to dust. Your art works by freezing everything, dragging the temperature of all things down, even your opponent's body. But I don't carry an ordinary body to begin with. The light soul dwells within me. Within Snow, the soul of light flared, pouring warmth through him that banished the frost's chill, that made him immune to the faux time freeze. He merely pretended to be caught, waiting for the perfect moment to end his foe. And so he won. Snow turned his gaze to a distant rise, golden light igniting in his eyes. Perhaps you think you can lay your hands on this planet however you please, with no one to oppose you. Let me tell you something important. He struck his chest with his left hand and shouted, thunder loud, "This earth is under our protection." Vermithor hummed in his grip as Snow's body blazed, a tidal wave of aura surging across the wastes. "And we'll guard it. To the death." He vanished. At the very same instant, while Geppetto was still reeling, Vermithor's edge whispered at the demon's throat at the speed of light. Above him, Snow Lionheart descended in that terrifying war form, intent on cutting down not just the puppet, but its master as well. The strike was blindingly fast. Clearly Snow had hoarded power for this moment. Geppetto tried to react, but he was a heartbeat too late. Snow's blade came down, detonating the ridge, leveling the hill and sending a tidal roar of aura across the land. Snow was certain he'd landed the kill. But before he could take the demon's head, the impossible happened. Snow's eyes flew wide as a hand clamped around Vermithor. The hooded figure who'd stood quietly behind Geppetto had intervened faster than even Snow could perceive, catching the blade effortlessly. With his bare hand? With one palm he stopped Vermithor. With the other he shaped a sort of condensed aura. Pure, honed, lightless edge. The masked giant swung. Snow snapped his great golden shield up to meet it. The moment blade met shield, Snow watched that mighty bulwark split in two, and the aura sword drive clean through his body. Slay an ash. With a single blow, blood burst from Snow's chest, and a large portion of his shield arm was carved away. The same golden shield that had shrugged off the Bahara Knight's strikes was hewn neatly in half. The hooded man followed with a short, brutal punch that launched Snow, slamming him into the ground with crushing force. The blow flung him back, tumbling until he smashed into a colossal boulder that pinned him in place. There he lay amid his blood, fighting to steady himself. The hooded figure dropped from the air as well, a sword of pure aura in his hand. Seeing him draw near, Snow rose at once. That aura, the star aura. He recognized it clearly. But its intensity was terrifying. He hadn't expected another warrior at the demon's side, much less one this strong. This was no joke. He had sensed Geppetto earlier, but he had never felt this man at all. Snow's eyes flared as he readied himself. I've got no choice but to use the light soul to deal with him. If I push myself to the limit, I should be able to manage. The hooded figure advanced in heavy steps. Studying him, Snow tried to read the man's makeup. And what he saw stunned him. No matter how he looked, there were no organs, no flesh. Only aura flowing freely everywhere, running his body in place of vital systems. What shocked Snow even more was that this wasn't ordinary aura. This is ignited aura. He rejected the thought on instinct. Impossible. Igniting one's aura grants a massive surge of power, but it dooms the user to certain death. Yet this man, the more he analyzed, the deeper his disbelief. He's burning constantly, and controlling that power absolutely without any backlash. That shouldn't be possible. Even in the pure vessel's memories, he had never seen anything like it. Realizing the calamity standing before him, Snow braced to fight. Only to learn how naive that was. The man's blade lashed out from nowhere with speed beyond imagining. The masked giant unleashed a torrential flurry of star slashes. So many, so fast, they shredded the battlefield itself, tearing it to pieces. And with them, Snow was ripped open as hundreds of bloody fissures crawled across his armored body. He hadn't even seen the strike. One brutal blow knocked him out of his war state and hurled him away. The hooded figure kept walking through the ruins, intent on ending him, until Geppetto intervened at the last instant. That's enough. Don't kill him. We're here to stop him, not to end him. Geppetto stood in his path, one forearm trembling. Even facing a thing he commanded, the 13th seat felt nothing but fear before that monster. Wesker doesn't want him dead. His death would trigger interferences we do not want. And I'm not bold enough to defy the 4th-ranked demon, so stand down. The hooded man held still a beat. Then the sword in his hand dimmed away. He turned and walked back to his post. Geppetto exhaled in relief, his gaze falling to where Snow had collapsed. We'll meet again, Lightbearer. And then the battle will be to the death. He turned to go. Count on it, Snow answered. Thus the fight ended, in a harsh defeat for the White Knight of Earth. Fry Starlight's POV. On that day, I stared into the abyss, and the abyss stared back at me. The fight against Zebar was different. Different from anything I've suffered through so far. It wasn't the first time I'd stood before a presence vastly stronger than me. I'd met the engineer, Gehrman, and I'd once felt the nearness of the sixth high demon, Asmodeus. I spent my life defying giants. But this was the first time I had to battle one of them to the death. And it was hell. Even with only half his power, Zebar overwhelmed me completely, a brutal reminder of what the 10 high ranks truly are. Beings that exist on an entirely different plane. Nameless Judgment was the only strike that dealt him real damage. Everything else I threw at him barely scratched him. He, on the other hand, tore my body apart again and again. Then even shut down my regeneration. I'd believed that ability triggered automatically against any injury. I was wrong. If I'm hit by a kind of damage my body has never endured before, regeneration won't trigger at all. That's how I ended up in that wretched state against Zebar. That was the turning point. From there, my defeat felt inevitable. At first, I was desperate. I genuinely thought I had no chance. I used everything. Every ounce of strength, every skill. And that was all the height I could reach. I truly believed I'd hit my ceiling. That belief shattered the moment he took over. Nameless. In the dark within that lightless void. I floundered alone. The little campfire where I used to gather with my other selves had gone out, and there was no trace of them. Instead, it was just me and the masked man. We shared the same space, yet we were impossibly far apart. The black around me pressed like deep-sea pressure, pinning me in place. Nameless sat across the gulf, back on that chair, head bowed. I've long feared I was nothing more than a vessel for that terrifying being. That fear has followed me for a long time, and lately it's become a truth I can't deny. Nameless has returned, and his will grow stronger by the day, and shadow adaptation seems tied to it. As I looked at that masked figure, the feelings inside me kept piling up. Fear gave way to curiosity. From afar I shouted, calling to him with everything I had. I wanted to speak to him. Anything. But my voice never reached him, as if something broke it in transit. Little by little, the darkness grew heavier, freezing me in place. All I could do was lie there in silence and stare at the man in the mask. I knew I was unconscious in the real world. That last nameless judgment had bled me dry. It was the strongest blow I've ever swung, and I'd never have reached it without him, without Nameless. I thought I'd mastered my powers, that I'd reached my peak. He proved how wrong I was. When Nameless took control, it wasn't as if he summoned new power from nowhere, or added anything foreign. He simply used what he found in my body. The very abilities I suspect were his to begin with. Shadow adaptation at stage 4. My dark weapons. A fighting style all his own, one I'm sure he forged himself. All of that was already within me, and while I was being crushed, he won easily with the very same tools. He redefined strength for me, laid my shortcomings bare, and showed me how far I still am from the top of what I already possess. At the same time, he made me wonder, if Nameless can do this much with my current body, how high is his true ceiling? The level at which he once traded even blows with the Demon King, Agaroth. When I face that reality, I can't help feeling small beside him. Without meaning to, I feel myself being pulled under. Before a monster like that, how am I supposed to keep my body from being taken? I felt like a thin shadow next to him, a shadow that could vanish at any moment under his presence. So I fought desperately to take myself back. I was terrified of being lost forever to him. But contrary to my fear and expectations, Nameless didn't resist. He relinquished my body quickly, and I returned to the battle with Zebar in the end. Because he yielded. My fear turned into curiosity. Why? I asked quietly, my voice finally cutting through the dark. Why didn't you resist? Why did you let me take control so easily? At first I thought you couldn't. But that wasn't true at all. If Nameless had fought me for this body, I wouldn't have been able to resist him, not for a second. But he chose not to. He yielded of his own will. Why? I wanted the answer to that question, but I couldn't get it. My voice never reached him. Slowly, The darkness thickened and I felt my awareness drift. That was how I knew I was about to wake up. Back in the real world. In those last seconds, all I could do was stare at Nameless from afar. And in that moment he looked back. Facing that monster who once walked the road of blood, I felt something strange toward him. Almost as if, I've known you before. Whatever the answer is, I won't get it today. But someday I will. Of that I was certain. Those were my last thoughts in that closed, lightless space. Before I returned to reality. Somewhere on the continent of the Ultras, beneath the ceaseless drum of heavy rain that hadn't let up for days, Fry Starlight opened his eyes again, aware he was still alive to see another day. He pushed his upper body up slowly and took stock. He was in a small cave. No, a grotto carved out by the last battle with Zebar. Checking himself over, he found no wounds. Someone had thrown a cover over him, and his aura reserves had been restored. Somewhat. While he was still orienting himself, footsteps approached the cave mouth. Someone peeked in to check on him, and when she saw him awake, she dropped what she was carrying in surprise, eyes widening. Ah, Ariel. Of course. It was the saint. She had been tending to him the whole time he was out. Fry was about to speak, but she blindsided him with a quick embrace, seemingly unable to stop herself. So he fell silent. I'm all right, Uriel. There's no need to worry, he said, patting her back and holding still for a moment. I thought you weren't going to wake up, especially after seeing the devastation your last fight left behind. Hearing that, Fry let out a small, helpless laugh. Even he hadn't expected to survive at one point. I'm here. I'm still alive. And I don't plan on dying anytime soon. So don't worry. Despite his reassuring words, Uriel's expression tightened. She didn't believe a single word. He had recovered from a cataclysmic battle against an enemy none of them even knew by name. Judging by the aftermath, he'd faced a cursed monster beyond their comprehension. Of that she was sure. And she was equally sure that Fry would head straight back to the front to fight again. Against enemies even stronger. He would do it even if it meant standing alone. Knowing his damned nature, she couldn't believe him at all. Fry realized his words wouldn't reach her, especially when his actions so often contradicted them. So, instead of speaking more, he simply slipped his arms around her in return, letting his head sink for a few seconds against her shoulder, near her neck. In this bleak, filthy land of the Ultras, being this close to Uriel, overflowing with the power of life, was a blessing. The warmth of her body, the clean scent that teased his senses, none of it belonged in this cold land of death. So he took the gift as it was and let himself rest for a while in her arms. She was different from Sansa. She carried a maturity his demon friend did not. Uriel was 5 years older than him. 24 now and fully grown. That, in itself, held a special kind of magic. They say a single, mature woman can pull a man out of the pit of despair in a single night. Fry had heard that saying many times long ago. He didn't know how true it was, but he was certain Uriel could do it with ease. The moment of peace didn't last. Neither Fry nor Uriel moved beyond that embrace before they were interrupted. My apologies. It seems I'm intruding on something, said Saris as she stepped in to check the place, drawn by the sense that Fry had begun to stir. On the other hand, Uriel slowly drew back as Fry let her go. Fry had nerves of steel. Even being caught by Saris like that didn't rattle him. Uriel, though, couldn't control her embarrassment. She averted her eyes, unable to meet Saris's gaze. Fortunately, Saris was even cooler-headed than Fry himself. She didn't overreact and moved on immediately. I'm glad to see you awake again, Fry, but forgive me. I have to trouble you even though you've only just come to, Saris said, sincerely apologetic. It's fine. I know there's a lot that needs explaining, Fry replied. He rose slowly, then realized his clothes had been reduced to nothing in the last battle. With a frown he sat back down, letting the blanket cover what needed covering. Could I have some clothes first? Of course, Saris sighed lightly, flicking a look toward Uriel. the one who'd insisted on caring for him herself and thus was in charge of such things. Uriel gave an apologetic glance and hurried out to fetch something, leaving Fry and Saris alone for a time. The air was awkward for a moment, but they broke the ice quickly enough. Talking wasn't hard for them anymore. How long was I out? Fry asked, not wanting to waste time. Not long. Barely a day, Saris answered. Ah, better than I expected. For a moment it had felt much longer from his point of view. A single day after that battle. Far better than he'd hoped. Since he'd asked first, Saris didn't hesitate to voice what had been weighing on her. She wanted to know what had happened, who Fry had fought. But there was something more urgent. Fry, what happened to them? To our comrades whose signals vanished. That was what she most needed to know. When we arrived, we found no one but you, lying in the middle of a massive crater. I searched myself, swept the area over and over. There was no trace of them. Saris fell silent for a few seconds. She had been composed the whole time. Even when they first reached the battlefield, she helped Uriel, did everything required of her. But despite scouring the entire area, she found nothing, and the worst possibility forced its way into her mind. Are they already? She asked the only question that mattered. Among the missing were people close to her, especially Frost Moonlight and many members of her house. Frost was the current lord of House Moonlight. If he was dead, the title would fall to her. She didn't want that. And losing Frost would be a heavy blow, especially now that he had matured and become a dependable leader. Fry didn't intend to hide it. He shook his head quietly and apologized. I'm sorry. There was nothing I could do. So that means they're dead. All of them. He answered firmly, lowering his head a little. It was their misfortune that set them before a monster. A monster that shouldn't exist in this world. Then he let out a thin, joyless laugh. No, it would be hypocrisy to blame luck now. Most likely they died because of me. Saris didn't understand. Because of you? Fry nodded. The one who did that to them was targeting me from the start. They were just tools he used to draw me out. So, you could say I'm the reason this happened to them. What he said laid bare his fractured, fragile nature. A man who had shouldered most of the war's horrors alone and was ready to take the blame for anything that happened around him. It was true Zebar had been after him. Still, the reason Frost and the others died was Zebar, not Fry. But in his current, broken state, Fry wouldn't accept that. For now, I want to hear everything. Exactly what happened, Saris said. I promise I'll tell you. And the others. I'm sure they all want an explanation, Fry replied. There was no point hiding it any longer. Saris didn't reproach him, but she didn't comfort him either. Not when she didn't yet know the facts. That was simply the kind of person she was, and Fry didn't dislike it. In fact, he found it fitting. But first, he had a different question. Since I woke up, I spread my aura and checked the area, but I can't sense him. Everyone was here. Except one. Where is Snow? That was what Fry truly wanted to know. Something Saris didn't quite know how to answer. Snow Lionheart was missing, alongside the Imperial host. The army assigned to deal with the Hollows. An emergency council was convened near the field where Fry Starlight had fought his last battle. It looked like a meeting from the outside, but in truth it was a hearing. An inquiry held to hear the truth straight from Fry Starlight's mouth. What had happened, and what exactly had caused that much devastation? On paper, the session was chaired by Gal Varian Sunlight, commander of that front, with several ranking officers at his side. Most of Frey's friends were present as well, gathered close behind him. Within minutes, Fry took his seat across from Gal. The latter chose his words 100 times before speaking, unsure how to handle someone whose power so vastly eclipsed his own. After all, Fry was now a potential threat to the Empire. He had tried to kill Prince Aegon Valyrian. And while they were wary of him, there was little they could actually do. Gal's only option was to go along and try to stay on Frey's good side. Fry Starlight, I trust you know why we've gathered. Gal began. Fry nodded. I do. You want the truth of what happened. Though this doesn't feel like a meeting to me. He leaned back, indifferent. Still, I'm not looking to escalate anything. I'll give you what you want. With every eye on him, Fry began. First, let's settle one point and stop living in denial. You all know the gates our forebears sealed have opened again. I'm sure the rumor reached you. I don't know whether you chose to believe it or not, but know this. It's real. There's no ambiguity. At the mention of the gates, Fry caught hesitation flicker across several faces. If the gate's broken, that means demons far stronger than before can enter our lands, Gal said. They already have, Fry answered. And they're walking this earth, lurking far closer than you think. Gal Varan's sunlight. That's impossible. Gal lost his composure for a heartbeat, whispers of disbelief rippling through the tent. The higher demons are foes mankind cannot face. If they were here, we wouldn't be alive to talk. They'd have attacked already, Gal pressed. It was a fair point, and Fry found the explanation tedious. He didn't bother to unpack it, nor to bring up the possibility that heroes of the past might still be alive. A shadow of ill omen brushed his thoughts when he recalled Leora's refusal to come and what might have become of her. Believe what you want, Fry said. Just keep what I've told you in mind, so you don't regret it later. He moved on. Which brings me to the battle I just fought, the one that produced the crater you all saw. At last, he spoke of his enemy. Here, on this very ground, I fought a demon. Not just any demon. He swept the room with a steady gaze. My opponent was Zebar, the 10th of the upper demons. The name landed like a hammer. Silence fell, followed by a stunned collective intake of breath. The 10th? Many stared at Fry as if he'd just told the wildest lie imaginable. Even humans knew of the upper 10 monsters of power beyond reason. You're telling me you faced such a demon and lived? Gal demanded, tight-voiced. I didn't just live, Fry said. I won. And I'm supposed to believe that? Gal sounded incredulous, as if the very notion insulted him. Fry wasn't lying, though he omitted that what he'd fought was a mere copy. Explaining reincarnating souls and world-breaking abilities would only invite headaches, and Fry saw no benefit in burdening men like Gal with that truth. So according to you, Gal summarized, an upper 10 demon appeared on this soil, slaughtered our scouting teams to lure you in. You fought him here, and you defeated him? Fry nodded. That's right. Gal's fist tightened until it crushed the armrest of his chair. The account sounded like fantasy. Why would the 10th come himself, take the trouble to kill the likes of Frost Moonlight and Ellen White just to bait Fry? And stranger still, Fry claimed he had prevailed. To Gal, a far more reasonable explanation was that Fry himself had killed the scouts. But he couldn't voice that after feeling the aftershock of the insane battle that had clearly taken place. Outside of Frey's own companions, most of whom believed him, the rest rejected his story outright. Fry didn't bother pushing back. He simply pointed them to one immovable fact. If you think I'm exaggerating or lying, if you won't accept that enemies of that level are already near, then do me one favor, look up. The best proof is hanging over your heads. He meant the sundered moon, split by his final nameless judgment. Like it or not, that's the truth, Fry finished. The sooner you accept it, the better your chances of surviving what's coming. Because none of us knows how this war ends. It was a mistake to think the Ultras were the last enemy, that victory over them would be the end. What stood behind the Ultras was far greater. And far worse. Zebar, the 10th of the upper 10, was only a small taste of the horrors still waiting. As soon as he finished speaking, Fry rose and walked out of the council. Where do you think you're going, Fry Starlight? Gal called after him, trying to halt him. Barely a quarter hour had passed since the meeting began, but Fry had no intention of staying a moment longer. I've no time to waste here. I told you what I know and I'm leaving. Snow Lionheart is still missing, and finding him is my top priority. He spoke over his shoulder and continued on, unmoved by the threats tossed after him. There was nothing they could do to stop him anyway. Don't forget to brief your lord on what you heard, Fry added. He'll want the news. He meant Aegon Valyrian, who would certainly hear of it first. Enemies were everywhere. And Aegon Valyrian was one of them, perhaps the worst of them. Fry couldn't see through the fog around the prince. Everything about him was sunk in deep obscurity. But Fry was convinced the prince stood with the demons. Let him know even Zebar hadn't been enough to kill him. Perhaps that alone would keep him at bay for a time. And so Fry left. A small group peeled off to follow him at once. Turning back to them, he smiled. What is it? Have you all come to see me off? To go with you, said Demon Valyrian, taking the lead for the rest. I'd rather follow you than sit with that gaggle of feeble old men. Demon's admiration was plain. You're the one who beat the 10th, right? That alone is reason enough for me. Demon respected only true warriors and real strength. And both stood before him in Fry. The sundered moon above had sealed his decision. The others had their own reasons. Oriel came simply to support him. Cerys, Selena, and Dawn had their motives as well. Seeing them all ready to accompany him, Fry realized that, at least this time, he wouldn't be alone. Good. I won't stop you, but you'll have to watch yourselves. My path keeps dragging me into the hardest fights. He scratched his head and kept walking. Not that I go looking for them. Even if he sought peace, the enemies seemed to find him anyway. We're heading to where Snow disappeared, right? Cerys asked. Yes, straight there, Fry said. But first, there's something we need to retrieve. And I think it matters to you in particular, Cerys. Her curiosity kindled. Cerys fell in beside him as Fry led them to a spot near the crater carved by his battle with Zebar. As they walked, most of them couldn't help but gape at the scale of the destruction. Then, in an instant, everyone's eyes snapped to Fry as a strange pressure rolled off him. He stood before a mountain of rubble, a jagged hill of shattered stone. Fry raised his left hand and called to Balerion. He answered, but not as the familiar blade. He flowed into a black, eerie gauntlet that clad his arm to the shoulder. He's still taking this shape, Fry murmured, studying the black metal. He summoned Dark Sister as well, and gripped it with Balerion. The moment the two met, their power seemed to fuse entirely, and Frey's strength surged. If his weapons had once been SS tier, he wondered what tier this fusion now represented. Along with the weapon fusion, Fry could now call on stage 4 of shadow adaptation without strain. In seconds, a pitch-black aura crept over Dark Sister in answer. The black hole aura, a different, terrifying power. Mastered by Nameless when his control reached heights no one else had attained. It was that aura which had once let his blades carve through demons with ease, and even wound Agaroth himself. Weapons fused. Black hole aura awakened. Dark Ascension ready to be invoked. With the three combined, Fry felt his power spike. Thanks to Nameless, who had forced that path open for him. Yet the feeling brought him little joy. It wasn't born of his own effort. He felt like a lesser version of the original. Even with all this, he was still weaker than the Nameless who had fought Zebar. I've still got a long road ahead, he sighed, giving Dark Sister an idle sweep. A single casual stroke sent a roaring wave of aura across the rubble mountain and erased it to dust. The onlookers were struck speechless. Fry could now loose that much force with a simple swing. When the debris cleared, something lay exposed within the ruin. Something many recognized, Cerys most of all. This! Fry reached down and wrenched it free, lifting it high. The great spear, Remshard, the only thing that survived. While the bodies had all been obliterated, this alone had endured. Fry studied it for a breath, then tossed it to Cerys. I believe this belongs to you, and to your house. Before moving on, he preferred to return the weapon to its rightful owners. Cerys nodded her thanks. Thank you. She hugged the spear for a heartbeat, then stored it away, resolved to find a worthy bearer. Fry gave a satisfied nod. Now we can go. There's no reason to linger. Let's find Snow. And so Fry and his companions set out to search for the missing Snow Lionheart. After a grueling battle, cut short by an unexpected intervention, Snow Lionheart was defeated by a strange, terrifyingly powerful man. That power far surpassed the 13th high-rank demon, leaving Snow wondering how a monster like that could be under someone like Geppetto. That thought vanished at once as the masked man overwhelmed him completely, finishing him with a blistering chain of strikes. The onslaught tore Snow out of the anointed war state, forcing an immediate loss and dropping him unconscious before the enemy. The 13th high-rank demon didn't kill him. Orders from above forbade it. So he left Snow alive and departed with the masked man. There, on the barren desert floor, Snow lay unconscious with nothing to protect him in the enemy's domain. Though the demon had spared his life, Snow was far from safe. The Ultra's wastes crawled with every kind of blight. Even the weakest would be a threat to him in that state. Mutated humans that wandered aimlessly, nightmare beasts, even Ultras themselves, who would rejoice at slaying an Imperial hero. Normally, nightmare creatures wouldn't dare approach, not with Snow's power. But now, he was prey. Soon, hideous creatures began to gather at the site of the battle, slowly encircling him. Mutated humans with black ichor and blood drooling from their mouths, as if they had finally found a meal to sate their hunger. Snow, still unconscious, had no idea what was about to befall him. As the monsters reached for him, their limbs simply fell away severed, and they were cut down one after another at terrifying speed. Within seconds, all of them lay ruined and dead around Snow. Then, as the bodies stilled, something began to drag Snow's limp form. A strange force curled around him, hauling him away into one of the Ultra's dark, forgotten hollows. A full day passed. Fry and the others had already begun searching, but it was in vain. All trace of him was gone. At first Snow remained unconscious, but his extraordinary body soon began to recover on its own, feeding on the abundance of sacred power within him. Normally, he would have recovered mid-battle the moment he was injured, yet the masked man's blows had been so destructive that the aura of the star kept ravaging his body for hours. The sacred power had to wrestle it constantly, expelling it at last. Only then could the healing begin. That was why his recovery took so long. In the end, Snow opened his golden eyes. The first things to reach him were the stench of thick blood and the sight of bizarre torture implements surrounding him on all sides. Realizing where he was, Snow tried to move, only for the slightest attempt to send a savage wave of pain through him. Something was paralyzing him completely. He looked down at himself. He was suspended, both arms and legs bound. He was utterly naked. What seized his attention most were clusters of crimson spikes driven deep into various points across his body. Those nails were the source of the pain. They had completely numbed him and sealed his power. "Where the hell am I?" Snow asked, scanning the chamber. Beside him lay a scatter of mutilated corpses, long dead, desecrated in bizarre ways. Mouths sewn shut, eyes stitched over. Others had their limbs severed and reattached in the wrong places, leaving them like grotesque, misshapen chimeras. It all drew a hard scowl from Snow. Given how thoroughly he'd been restrained and suppressed, the one who dragged him here was no trivial foe. "Looks like I've wandered into a monster's den," he muttered, taking stock. The last thing he remembered was the battle with Geppetto and his underlings. How that man had finished him. "I need to get out of here and return to Imperial forces. The demons have a roaring beast among them, one that might rival the 10 high ranks." A man like that under Geppetto's control was a catastrophe. One that had to be prioritized. Since he'd failed to fight him off even after invoking his strongest war form, Snow knew he couldn't win at his current level. His only option was to join forces with Fry and hope the two of them together could deal with that man. And with Geppetto ever at his side, it would at best be 2 against 2. Never mind the other fighters and the army of dead that Geppetto commanded. Thinking it through, Snow finally grasped the dreadfulness of the 13th high rank. That demon hadn't reached his seat by personal might alone, but through that terrifying ability to weaponize the dead. An entire army hidden beneath the shadow of a single demon. The fact that such a demon stood against them now, the odds weren't in their favor at all. I need to do something about that. But first, pulling his focus back to the present, Snow realized his immediate situation took absolute priority. I have to get out of here. He tried to gather his strength, to coax his aura into motion. But every time he did, the crimson spikes driven into different points of his body shut it down at once. Whoever had hammered them in had targeted critical, precise nodes that left his body refusing to respond. What are these damned spikes, exactly? They were strange implements indeed. They didn't just block his internal aura flow. They even tampered with his blood itself. He could feel something circulating within him, as if it had mingled with his blood and seized control. Piece by piece, the signs pointed Snow toward the identity of whoever had done this to him. He didn't have to wait long for confirmation. The clicking of heels rang from somewhere down the corridor. High heels, sharp and unhurried, drew closer, until she appeared. Ah, you're finally awake. Beaming at him, the strange girl hurried over. She wore a simple black dress, its hem dappled with flecks of blood. Her skin was pale as chalk, her hair jet black, and there was a small spider-shaped tattoo at her throat. She was admittedly stunning, but Snow didn't fall for the surface. She carried the same scent. The stench of blood. You slept for such a long time. I thought you might never wake up, she chirped. Snow's face hardened. Given the way he'd been bound and displayed before her, he had already guessed. If I'm not mistaken, you're a hollow. The Blood Queen, Evelyn. Aren't you? He said, voice edged with doubt. The girl blinked, then lit up. Marvelous. You sussed me out just by reading the room. As expected of the Empire's hero. Ahahaha. Exactly so, Evelyn the Hollow. One of the strangest, most brutal among them, always hiding her true nature behind that innocent mask. Snow's predator's gaze stayed locked on her as he ran the numbers. Under normal circumstances, dealing with her would be easy. She was SS class, a level he had surpassed long ago. But as he was, wounded, fully suppressed, he was little more than an ordinary man. His options were scant. Evelyn's smile deepened. Look at those eyes. The eyes of a beast who'll kill me the moment he gets the chance. I do love eyes like that. She reached out and laid her hand over his bare chest. Unfortunately for you, you can't do a thing to me. Your body already belongs to me. At her touch, a wave of pain roared through him, as if every cell in his body were reacting to her. Snow clenched his teeth and wrote it out. What do you want? Why leave me alive? If it's torture for information you're after, you're wasting your time, he added, steadying his breath. Information? Whatever are you talking about? She laughed lightly. With a sadist smile, her fingers traced slowly across his bare torso. I don't care about this silly war. I only care about finding a partner to play with. Her hand clamped down hard around him below. A partner who can last a very, very long time. Snow's body went taut, a chill running through him at her intent. At first, I wanted Fry Starlight. I waited for him to fall. But he's a real monster. He scared me. Her voice dropped, honest and almost breathless. He defeated one of the high-rank demons himself. It was the first time I'd ever felt something like that. Fear. Even collapsed and unconscious, Fry had been an unknown. His body all wrong to her senses. If she tried to shackle him, he would break free and kill her. That's when I found you, dear Snow Lionheart. Snow was powerful, but unlike Fry, his body obeyed sane rules. If she drained him completely, her bloodcraft could restrain him. From now on, we'll always be together, Snow Lionheart. You'll be my eternal partner, so do try to endure. She leaned in closer and closer. I get a bit rough sometimes. She lunged, kissing him with violent hunger, her free hand still gripping below. Snow's body was fettered. He couldn't move. She thought her net was already tight around him. But at the very moment she believed that, Snow answered. And she realized just how grave a mistake she'd made. Mid-kiss, he struck. Mouth opening, he bit down, savaging her lips and tearing away a mouthful of flesh and skin. Blood burst and spattered. Evelyn jerked back with a strangled sound, clutching at her ruined mouth. Snow chewed once, twice, then spat the blood onto the floor and looked at her with a feral smile. "You taste foul, Blood Queen Evelyn." At that, Evelyn finally understood. Her partner this time was no ordinary man at all. Somewhere in the middle of the Ultra's continent, a small party carved through the barren heartland at breakneck speed. They were few, but several of them possessed staggering individual power. In less than a single day they clashed with multiple enemy groups and erased them in record time. It was, of course, Fry Starlight's squad, only his friends from the temple. After a full day on the move, they paused beneath the shade of a mountain to catch their breath. Sitting in a close circle, they were still searching for Snow Lionheart. "It looks like Snow fought a hard battle too," Saris murmured, remembering what they'd found at the point where his signal vanished. The place had been a ruin. Clear evidence of a brutal fight. And that stirred fresh worry about the Empire's White Knight. "Snow isn't weak. He won't die that easily," Fry said, scrolling idly through the system interface. Snow's name still sat there, along with a high affinity score. At the very least, it meant he was alive. He was likely unconscious, which was why Fry couldn't lock onto him with the third-person player view. "The moment I get a fix on him, I'll teleport straight in and bring him back." That was the plan. But he'd gotten no ping at all for the past 24 hours. "You said you fought a demon of the 10th upper rank, Fry. Makes me wonder what Snow ran into at the same time," Demon said, fiddling with his armor. Fry hesitated, then answered, "I don't know exactly what he fought, but it wasn't some ordinary foe. Most likely the demon of the 13th upper rank. Sorry for keeping that to myself, but the 10th didn't come alone. The 13th was here too." "And how does the 13th compare to the 10th? Dawn asked. "There's no comparison in raw power. The 10th is far stronger," Fry said, laying out what he knew. He wasn't wrong. Even at 50%, Zebar's clone outclassed Geppetto. The gap between the top 10 and those below, save perhaps the 11th, was enormous. But Geppetto was a special case. The 13th is terrifying because of his cursed ability. He can use the corpses of the dead, raise them, and make them fight for him. In wartime, that makes him one of the most dangerous demons alive. His army of the dead has no known limit. That left most of them stunned. Isn't that a catastrophe for us? If he can use corpses at will, he can build an endless army. And even turn our fallen against us, Selena said. Fry nodded. Exactly. That's why he has to be killed as soon as possible. Easier said than done. Geppetto had survived for ages. No one had managed to kill him. Demons weren't fools. They never let him roam alone. He'd come with Zebar. And even without Zebar, Whisker lurked close by. Dealing with him was a genuine headache. This is infuriating. It feels like we won't be able to do anything against enemies like that. Demon grumbled, clearly rattled by the scale of the battles they were glimpsing. The man beside him was the one who had split the moon with his sword. Fry only shook his head. Don't jump ahead. Everyone has a role to play in this war. You're all strong. You just need time to grow. You sound like an old man when you say that. And it's not exactly fair coming from you, considering you hit your current level at record pace. Demon shot back. He'd been born with talent, yes. But he was still human. No cosmic entity had chosen him as a successor. No broken training path had catapulted him past his peers. Chasing strength, he'd done something no one else had. After losing a leg during that old abduction and hunt on the Ultra's continent, he replaced it with his golden armor's limb, and then kept going, deliberately destroying more of his body and fusing it with the same golden armor. It was a savage, merciless process with no guarantees. But Demon did it. Whenever Fry looked at him with enhanced sight, the results still seemed bizarre. More than half of Demon's body had merged with the armor. He'd become something like a cyborg. Half man, half weapon. That strange evolution had supercharged him. But even so, he was still far from Fry and Snow. Impressive as Demon's feat was, it wasn't enough to reach their tier. My strength comes from the trials I've lived through, the life and death fights I survived. I'm just a walking mass of chaos wearing a human shape. Don't compare yourself to me. Move at your own pace, Demon. Fry looked around at the others. That goes for all of you. I'm getting used to the supernatural lately. Nothing feels that strange anymore. Take Dawn Polaris here. Perfect example, Selena said, propping her chin on one hand, pointing at Dawn beside her. He's got some freaky ability that lets him survive anything, no matter the opponent. Honestly, I find that more impressive than the raw power you monsters throw around. The last survivor. Dawn's ability would always be a mystery, and Selena wasn't wrong. Since you brought it up, I've always felt something off with you, Dawn Polaris. What exactly is that ability of yours? Demon asked, thinking back. Back when we were hunted, you were the only one who came out without a scratch. Even in this war, you're always spotless. Meanwhile, the sorceress next to you has taken hits. It didn't add up. That's why I stick close to him, Selena said dryly. I know I'm guaranteed to make it out as long as I do. At that, Demon Valerian raised an eyebrow. Really? I figured you two were having some kind of wartime romance the way you cling to him. Ha! Who in the hell would do that in the middle of a war? Selena snapped, so Demon simply pointed at someone. Fry Starlight does. Thinking about it, everyone had to admit he had a point. Love and war. Those two don't mix at all. How can you even think about relationships when death is breathing down your neck every second? Selena asked. And the reply came from Fry, unexpectedly. What's wrong with it? Seems like a good way to step away from the pressure of war now and then. Fry smiled lightly. He drew everyone's gaze. Especially Oriel, who hadn't expected that from him. Fry had always seemed like a man who poured everything into fighting, to the point that chasing romance felt unreal for him. He fought and fought. Every time he felled one enemy and survived, an even worse one appeared. The cycle repeated like a curse. Yet even under that crushing weight, he could still say something like this. No one could find a retort. Anyway, Dawn, let me give you a friend's advice, Fry said, turning back to him. Of course, Dawn Polaris replied easily. Then Fry warned him. That ability that keeps saving your life. The strong. Like Selena said, in some ways it's more impressive than what people like me and Snow have, but it isn't absolute. Keep that in mind. At that, both Dawn and Selena frowned. What do you mean, Fry? Please be clear. Selena shot back. Dawn seemed to share her view. He truly believed he could survive any situation he ended up in. Fry wanted to pull him out of that illusion. What you have is an ability. Supernatural, yes, but still just an ability. Keeps you alive, sure. But you're not the only one in this world with something like that, Fry continued. Plenty of beings have comparable tricks, and the upper 10 demons are prime examples. Your power might save you from most of them, but some have tools that can nullify the causality your last survivor relies on. If that happens, you know what the result will be. He said it flatly, and Dawn stiffened for a beat. So you're saying his ability isn't absolute? Selena asked. There's nothing absolute in this world. Not even the Demon King, Fry replied. Believing in perfect powers was foolish. Everything had a weak point. And Dawn's was his total reliance on the last survivor. If he ever met a monster who could cancel the ability's causality, that would be the end. Fry wanted him to think about that and stop leaning on it blindly. Dawn clearly hadn't expected to hear this. He fell silent, mulling it over. Fry rose. Let's move. We've rested enough. They fell in behind him, setting off once more across the Ultra's desert. This really brings back memories. Can't believe we're out here again. Just us, Demon said, recalling their abduction and how they'd fought to escape the continent. A year later, they'd returned. By choice. A lot's changed since then, Fry said simply. They were far stronger now. No longer temple students dragged off in chains. I'm sure most of you have your reasons for coming back. As for me, I just wanted to pay back the sons of bitches who tried to kill me, Demon said, blunt as ever. Most of the elite students had chosen to return. Lara Croft the Archer was the lone exception, refusing to step foot on this continent after what happened. Aside from her, the rest were brave enough to come back. For me, I wanted to help others survive instead of surviving alone, Dawn said, voicing what he truly felt. It would be great if he could extend his ability to those around him. But realistically, it still looked like he'd mostly survive on his own. Selena kept her reason to herself. Sarah spoke next instead. I came to fight for my family and to take revenge on a certain someone. At that, Fry and the others knew exactly who she meant. Baylor Moonlight. She had fought him during the abduction and been utterly defeated. But she hadn't let go of her goal. Revenge was still her aim. My role is to save and support people. That's why I'm here, Oriel said softly from the center of the group. And there's a sin I want to atone for. That left Fry. The way you're all talking about your goals sounds like a string of death flags, he said dryly. Most people die before they ever reach what they're aiming for. Then he smiled and gave his own answer. My goal hasn't changed. I'm here to kill as many enemies as possible. Nothing more, nothing less. Simple as that. By doing it, Fry would keep growing. Strong enough to crush his foes, protect those close to him, and fight the fate closing in. As they trekked through the ultras in that brief calm, Fry had no idea how many mountains of corpses and seas of blood awaited him. The killing had only just begun. The road ahead was long, stacked with harsher, harder trials, ready to script a new struggle and new suffering, in a hidden place steeped in the stench of blood. A chamber that contained nothing but machines and instruments of torment. Snow Lionheart still hung there, naked and bound, while that mad woman, Evelyn, toyed with him. After their sadistic kiss ended with Snow tearing off a large portion of Evelyn's lips and mouth, the Blood Queen repaid him, and began to play in earnest. Slowly, she tested Snow's toughness and pain tolerance, peeling his skin little by little, flaying him alive, all while manipulating his blood to keep him from summoning any power at all. The agony was insane, and the more Snow's blood spilled, the deeper Evelyn's smile became. I always took you for the gallant, fearless hero, the perfect man without flaws. The wet rasp of her blood knife accompanied every word as Evelyn spoke, having already mended what Snow had done to her. But you did something feral, unbecoming of a hero. I suppose even your kind are capable of that. A noble, great hero eating human flesh, acting like demonkin themselves. Even Evelyn, steeped in gore and torture, found it strikingly strange. Snow endured the pain and managed to smile. Believe me, you haven't seen anything yet. How lovely. You can still speak so freely despite what I'm doing to you. His endurance was terrifying, less than Fry Starlight's, but still higher than anyone else's. Gradually, a strange golden force seeped through him, knitting flesh whenever the injuries deepened. I'm suppressing your power, and yet this sacred aura acts on its own in spite of me. Fascinating. That golden, sacred aura was peculiar, healing Snow's body automatically whenever he was wounded. It granted him something akin to Fry Starlight's monstrous regeneration, letting him recover from almost any injury at once. But that only delighted Evelyn. It meant she could play for a long time. As she tortured Snow, he began to acclimate to the pain. His gaze grew calmer, steady enough to speak without difficulty. It may be strange to ask you in this state, but I truly want to know. Why are you doing this? He fixed his eyes on Evelyn. She was stunningly beautiful. He could admit that easily. A different kind of beauty from Ceres and Oriel. A mysterious, gentle-seeming allure that could spark any man's curiosity. But those slender hands had been soaked in blood too long for any return. As his vision adjusted to the gloom, Snow noticed Evelyn's other toys. Dozens. No, hundreds of mutilated humans. She had severed her victims' limbs and grafted them onto one another. A man with 3 arms here, an extra leg there. Some she had fused to her female victims. The madness of that place sickened Snow Lionheart. And Evelyn's answer left him baffled. "Why am I doing this? What a silly question," she said, shaking her head as if she'd just heard something stupid. "To express my love, of course. What other reason could there be?" Her deeds were diseased. Her answer more diseased still. "Love. MHM. Humming as she flensed another strip of skin, Evelyn savored the scent of blood and raw flesh. There's no better way to show love than through pain. She drove her claws into him. After all, pain is the only kind of love I've ever had in my life. It's only fair to share some of it with others. Don't you think? Those last words convinced Snow she was profoundly unstable. Dangerous not only to the Empire, but to the Ultras as well. It was why she was a hollow, and why her personal power soared in war, where blood flowed freely. If Evelyn fought on a battlefield awash in blood, her output could exceed her rank and brush SS+. "Pain has never been a form of love," Snow said, eyes drifting to the other victims. "It's a manifestation of misery and suffering. If those shapes are the signs of the love you speak of, no one in this world would want love ever again." Evelyn's smile deepened. She sank the blade farther into him, drawing a low groan. "Well, you all say that at first. It makes you entertaining. But soon you start begging, and then you become boring." How many times had she done this? How often had she crossed every human boundary in love's name? Snow didn't know, but the number was surely vast. He couldn't help wondering what had made her this way. She claimed pain was the only love she'd known. What exactly had happened to her? Whatever the answer, Snow knew Evelyn had gone far beyond any line long ago. No past, however cruel, could excuse what she had become. The men she captured were mutilated. The ugly ones castrated outright. The handsome ones taken from time to sate her urges. Snow, for better or worse, fell into that latter group. As for the women, their fate was grim. Evelyn despised them, killing them swiftly, after prolonged torment. Aware of everything she had done, Snow Lionheart knew he could kill her without feeling a thing. Hours crawled by. The torture continued. Snow endured the pain with a terrifying steadiness much like Fry. And that only made Evelyn happier. Someone was finally withstanding her love without breaking, which meant she could get even more creative. "You really are wonderful, Snow Lionheart. Your endurance is impressive. You might be the one I've been searching for all these years." She said it as she wrapped up another session. Snow was soaked in blood. There wasn't a patch she hadn't carved. Even so, his golden eyes still burned just as fiercely. "Sorry, you're not my type. I suggest you find someone else," he said dryly, even in that state. "You're cruel. No matter what I'm doing, I'm at least confident in how I look." Striking a provocative pose, she closed in. "No use lying. You do find me attractive, don't you? It's hard to call a lunatic who enjoys flaying people attractive." Snow spat blood at her. The blood stopped in the air before it could touch her. "That's because you don't understand what love is. I'll make you understand eventually." "And what makes you so sure this will last?" Snow asked, talking more than he usually would. Evelyn noticed, but humored him anyway. "You think you'll escape? Sorry. That's impossible." She paced through her theater of torment. "This place is completely secret. No one knows it exists but me, so your friends won't find you. And you won't break free of me. I control every drop of blood in your body. In other words, you're not going anywhere." Snow exhaled a long breath as the sacred aura quietly set to mending him again. "What about the war? Don't the Ultras need their hollow?" She shrugged. "Who cares about them or their stupid war? I already got what I wanted. I have no reason to go back." "I see." Snow's smile sharpened. "You know you're going to lose, don't you? Your only hope is the demons. The Ultras alone aren't enough anymore." He pressed the blade in. "Even without me, Fry alone is more than enough to deal with you." He wasn't wrong. Fry Starlight had defeated a copy of Zebar that wielded half his true power, comparable to a Stage 2 Apex in SSS, without having even broken into SSS himself. When Snow felt Frey's aura that day, he knew that even after finding his own path, and gaining both the world-breaking light spirit and the sacred golden aura, he was still weaker. 3 paths: the human path, the demonic path, and the path of the greatest light-bearer of all. Even with all 3, he was still beneath Fry. That only deepened Snow's certainty about his enigmatic friend. If I, who am supposed to be the pure vessel himself, am still below you, Fry, then whatever sleeps in your depths is something far greater. Thinking of his friend, Snow smiled wide. I can't stay behind forever, can I? Evelyn arched a brow. What are you talking about? Nothing, just talking to myself. I think it's time to end this farce. As he said it, Snow raised his hand, and Evelyn's face darkened at once. In that hand, Vermithor manifested out of nothing, blazing with aura. In the same breath, Snow shattered the blood binding around his arm and unleashed a razor pillar of force that ripped across the chamber, tearing Evelyn's chest open and hurling her into the stone behind her. The strike caught her clean. She hadn't defended in time. Ah, you're tougher than I thought. I was hoping to cut you in half with that. Snow laughed, easing himself free by degrees. The Blood Queen struggled upright. How? How did I do it? Is that what you want to know? Snow flicked his tongue over blood-wet lips. You shouldn't have kissed me. By doing that, you let me eat your flesh. And as you can see, I can turn the human flesh I eat into power. Evelyn's expression curdled. Cannibal. It was the cannibal's way of growing stronger. One of the foulest paths of all. Who would have imagined the Empire's shining hero would use it? Bound so completely by her bloodcraft, Snow couldn't assume the anointed war state or use his power freely. He needed another way to scrape together strength. And that way was to eat human flesh. Even so, what he'd taken from Evelyn was barely enough for a single strike. Not quite sufficient to finish her. Snow was still weakened. She hurried to rouse her blood aura and clamp down on him again. But as she did, Snow smiled in her face. Too late, Blood Queen. He's already here. At that very instant, a violet flare split the chamber, right between Evelyn and Snow. And from nothing, a figure stepped in and flipped the board. Slash! With a motion so fast the Blood Queen couldn't even register it. He cleaved her without mercy. Fry Starlight had finally arrived. Seeing him, Snow let out a breath. Took you long enough, you bastard. Fry dropped Evelyn with a single blow, blindsiding her with the fused power of Balerion and Dark Sister. Then he turned to Snow. You're the one at fault. I could only jump in the moment you used your aura. While waiting on Snow, Fry had discovered something annoying. His third-person player POV wouldn't lock on if the target was unable to use aura at all. That was why he hadn't been able to pinpoint Snow and teleport to him sooner. Shrugging off his black cloak, Fry tossed it to the naked Snow. For now, heal up, and let's get out of this hellhole. One glance around made his lip curl. He'd walked into the den of one of the foulest hollows. Evelyn lay a short distance away, body half-severed. Yet she laughed when her eyes found Fry. Laughing in that state. She's completely insane, Snow muttered, stepping to Frey's side. Let's finish her and go, Fry said, not eager to linger. But Evelyn kept laughing, staring at Fry with a strange light in her eyes. Amazing, truly amazing, she breathed. You actually came. Just like that witch said. Those last words landed out of nowhere, and both Snow and Fry frowned. Fry froze as multiple explosive auras flared to life on every side. Signatures that had been smothered under some kind of veil, now suddenly revealed. At the same time, Evelyn's body liquefied into blood and seeped down the cracks in the floor. It all happened in an instant. Within seconds, their sharpened senses caught a voice. 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Snow shot Fry a look, but it wasn't him, which meant nameless judgment. The moment the name rang out, everything went black. Ravenous black fire surged, swallowing the sight whole. And the truth snapped into focus. Evelyn had lied. This place was no secret at all. It sat inside one of the high-blood cities, now encircled by thousands of ultras, with the masked V at their head. He had triggered the blast. And the arcane artillery followed, spewing devastation until the entire district was a single crater of ruin. Ultra's troops massed along the rim. Most of the big names were there, hollows and lords alike. "Did we get them?" a soldier asked, hopeful. He fell silent as a murderous intent crawled out from beneath the smoking rubble. The debris detonated upward. 2 figures rose from the blast. Frey's clothes were shredded, his torso bare. Snow was in similar shape. Both had been caught by the last strike, but most of the damage had been blunted. Thanks to Frey. With Dark Sister fused into Balerion in his left hand, Frey's eyes burned violet as he fixed on the distant V. Brushing black fire from his skin, he growled, "You call that nameless judgment? Ha! What a joke." He set his stance and held out a hand to Snow. Snow took it at once as Frey pushed a heavy surge of aura into him. "After my fight with Zebar, my reserves still aren't full," Frey said. "You'll have to make do with that." "I burned a lot in my last battle too," Snow answered. "But this will be enough." Together they advanced into the death trap the Ultras had laid. Frey's gaze swept the enemy line. Most of their main pieces were on the board. Lords and Hollows both, with Beatrice and the demon Beleth holding the rear. "Looks like they want to end the war here," Frey said. "Then let's grant them that," Snow replied. Retreat wasn't an option. Beatrice had raised a barrier the moment Frey arrived, blocking long-range teleportation. In other words, fighting was the only choice. And in this battle, it felt as if the fate of the war between the Empire and the Ultras would finally be decided. An ending about to be written.